Britain's news channel.
Six o'clock on the dot. Hello and a very good morning to you on this Tuesday morning, the 3rd of October. Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Welcome to the programme. Here's what's leading the news this morning. Trans women will be banned from female hospital wards. That's one of the proposals to be announced by the Health Secretary today in an aim to bring back, as he puts it, common sense to the health service.
The Prime Minister reportedly intends to axe HS2 northern leg to Manchester, but with many of his own MPs against the idea, could there be a Conservative civil war brewing? Our Deputy Political Editor Tom Harwood there for us.
An audacious proposal here in Manchester. Might the Prime Minister be taking the largest spending decision of his tenure in office? Potentially tens of billions of pounds of rail infrastructure hang in the balance, although at least one Conservative mayor, Andy Street, is not happy. I'll have the latest.
The Home Secretary will also be taking to the podium today with everything from policing to migration on the agenda, and we'll be speaking to the Justice Secretary later this hour.
Weather forecast courtesy of Alex Deacon this morning.
Bit of a wet start in places this morning, but most of us will have a bright and breezy day. There'll be some sunshine. There will also be a fair few showers. Join me later for a full forecast.
And sport, courtesy of Paul Coit.
How about this? Chelsea have won a game of football. Is that strong? Is that too strong? Luke Donald could stay on as Ryder Cup captain, and also Manchester City lose a legend.
They do indeed. And as always, you can join in any of our discussions, any of our debates, any of our opinions, any memories of Francis Lee. What about him and Norman Hunter? Oh, Isabel,
one of the
if we had
greatest
that footage,
tear-ups ever.
you would not believe this. It was like a boxing match, and it went on right after. It just went on, did it not? And on and
the
on.
arms were swinging.
And they chased each other around the pitch, punching,
those were the days.
kicking.
It was the happy days of football, Isabel. That's what it was, the happy days of football. You can have a good fight on the pitch and nobody can play.
Can you still be called a legend?
Absolutely.
GBviews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet us at GBnews. OK, so the Health Secretary wants to push back against what he calls wokery in the National Health Service. In an interview for The Telegraph, Steve Barclay revealed that he will announce in his speech at the Conservative Party conference later that transgender women will be banned from female wards.
In the interview, he also said we need a common sense approach to sex and equality issues in the NHS that's led to women's rights being sidelined.
Well, let's go to Tom Harwood there at the conference for us this morning, and he's been following events. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning. Yes, it seems like the Health Secretary is leaning into this refresh, this difference with regard to the agenda that the government is pushing forward. No longer are we seeing a steady ship approach, and now we are seeing a tack to being a change candidature for the next election. And we've already seen this with regards to rolling back some of those dates for net zero targets. We've heard rumours about about tax and spend and what might change before the next election. But now in the pages of the Telegraph this morning, the Health Secretary announcing what he will say in his speech with regard to transgender issues and indeed transgender women specifically on female wards within the NHS. Critics of the Health Secretary, critics of the Conservative Party would say, why is he donating quite so much time in his speech towards such a marginal issue? Of course, we don't know quite how many transgender women seek care on female wards within the NHS, but it's hardly going to be a huge number. But of course, what the government would say in response to that is that there are some huge concerns of some groups. The group Sex Matters is quoted, of course, by the Telegraph this morning, saying that this is timely and a rationalisation of policy. No doubt it will be a talking point throughout the day here, and there will be very strong views on either side. But potentially this is what Number 10 and indeed the Health Secretary want, that these wedge issues, if you like, are being found between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, creating clear blue water between those two parties in what is likely to be the next 12 months of greater election campaigning.
Certainly a unifying issue, you could argue, within the party, unlike perhaps tax or how to achieve growth. And look, it certainly feels, you know, as an observer from here in London, that the government's kind of lost control of the agenda, of the narrative around the whole conference. And you look at HS2, I mean, this has been a hoobery now for a couple of weeks and almost overshadowing the Chancellor's speech yesterday. And we're now led to believe that it will be announced in the Prime Minister's speech tomorrow.
Tomorrow. So he's not going to announce anything today, Tom, you think?
No, it's very unlikely he'll announce something today, although, to be honest, talking to people in and around the Conservative Party, it seems that this is a pretty dead set on decision. Despite the official line from Number 10, which is that no decisions have been made, it does seem that behind the scenes the decision very much has been made. But we are just waiting for the Prime Minister's big speech on Wednesday for that announcement to be made. So you get this peculiar dance of cabinet ministers and those in and around the government sort of raising an eyebrow but saying no decisions have been taken. We need to look at the cost-benefit analysis of this project. And it is fair to say that indeed the Conservative Party has been overseeing a spiralling of costs in this project. Originally projected to be around 32 billion pounds, now projected to be over 100 billion pounds. It's clear to see why indeed why the Prime Minister is looking at this extra leg. But of course, it has not been without controversy. Let's have a little listen.
I agree that we've been too London-centric in the past, and that's why we have a long-term plan for levelling up with lots of different ingredients.
So you must think that HS2 should go to Manchester then?
Well, I think levelling up involves doing many more things.
Give us your position on that. Should it go to Manchester?
Well, I think we need to make sure that we're getting absolute value for money from it.
Come on, you must be able to have an opinion on whether it should go to Manchester or not.
I absolutely think the most important thing is making sure that when we level up, we take into account all of the things that we need to do. So we've shifted Arts Council funding.
I know, but should it go to Manchester,
research
yes
and
or
development
no?
funding. Well, we're going to have to...
Should it? Not will it?
We're going to have to look at every conceivable pound that we spend on transport in order to make sure that we get value for money from it.
I know, but still not an answer to the question whether you think it should go to Manchester. All right.
And they're a bit of a flavour of what cabinet ministers have been struggling to communicate over the last few days here in Manchester. This peculiar holding pattern over whether or not a railway will be coming to this very city. Perhaps not the best communication strategy for the party over these few days. But after all, we are currently sitting in the Manchester Convention Complex, a disused railway station that was closed in the 1960s. Perhaps that will be referenced by the Prime Minister tomorrow. But it does seem a peculiar decision that this decision that has already likely been taken has just been hanging over this conference for the last 3 days.
OK, Tom, thank you very much. Well, we'll be keeping a close eye on all developments coming out of Manchester. Indeed, anyone who pops up, we may indeed talk to them throughout the course of the morning. And we've got Alex Chalk, who's the Justice Secretary, coming on at around 7:15 as well.
The Home Secretary will take to the stage today. She's under mounting pressure to deal with some of the country's biggest issues, and they are declining police numbers, rising crime rates, and the increasing numbers of illegal immigrants. So quite an in-tray.
Well, GB News' Pip Thompson has more.
Home Secretary Suella Braverman will speak at the Conservative Party conference later as the government tries to get to grips with some of the issues affecting the country. It comes as record numbers of police officers quit the force and knife crime continues to rise. In the year to March, 4,668 officers left after a voluntary resignation, against a backdrop of 48,204 knife crime offences. That's a 5% increase on March last year. Immigration is another challenge the government hopes to tackle, as GB News data reveals that more than 25,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year. Something else on the Home Secretary's agenda is the rather contentious Rwanda plan, set for a battle at the Supreme Court next week. Speaking in Washington, D.C., Suella Braverman argued that the 1951 Refugee Convention is too loose and hinted that the government could leave the ECHR.
Any attempt to reform the Refugee Convention will see you smeared as anti-refugee. Similar epithets are hurled at anyone who suggests reform of the ECHR or its court in Strasbourg. I reject the notion that a country cannot be expected to respect human rights if it is not signed up to an international human rights organisation.
The Home Secretary is expected to use her speech in Manchester to boost her popularity ratings among the more right-wing arm of the party. Ahead of a general election, many backbenchers fear they could lose. So, are we looking at a future Tory leader? One wouldn't bet against it. Pip Thompson, GB News.
Arguably the toughest job in the country. Look, we're joined now by former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley, regular on the programme. Good morning to you. One of the big issues that the Home Secretary really has to get a grip of is the crisis in policing. The Police Federation yesterday saying officer numbers are at dangerous levels now, to the stage where people will die as a result.
Well, we had Priti Patel yesterday, former Home Secretary, saying numbers at record levels.
Well, quite frankly, record numbers of police officers are leaving the job because they are delusioned, disheartened, worn out, and they find that the entire experience of being in policing completely unsatisfactory. And of course, that already has spilt out onto the streets, because let's just look at the last 3 or 4 days, for example. A 15-year-old girl loses her life to knife crime in Croydon, lives lost in Halifax, Leeds, and on Sunday night, another teenager in London butchered by savages on our streets. Crime is out of control. Knife crime is running rampant. Policing has lost its way, and consequently, we are all a bit more at risk.
And yet, Peter, as I was saying, Priti Patel speaking yesterday, and she was talking about how shoplifting should be prosecuted and taken more seriously and whatever. And you look at the litany of crimes that you've just recounted there, and you think, really, where are we getting the numbers? There is not so many officers that they can afford to go and check whether someone's stolen a Mars bar or not.
Yes, unfortunately, what's happened to policing in the last couple of decades is that it's become reactive rather than proactive. And what I mean by that is that officers sit in their cars and travel from one 999 call to another. They do not patrol the streets. That has been surrendered some time ago, and consequently, it's the criminals who act with impunity, who rule the roost on our streets, and consequently, we have record numbers of shop workers being assaulted, 800 a day, people being murdered on our streets with knives and machetes in yet again record numbers. So despite what the politicians may espouse, the truth of the matter is we are far less safe than we used to be. The streets need to be made a hostile environment for criminals. That's what the public want. That's what we need, and policing has quite frankly lost its way and needs to reconnect with the Robert Peel principles of 200 years ago and the needs, wishes, desires of the great British public.
Yeah, but as you say, violent crime up, prosecutions down, and I notice you say politicians. Do you accuse Labour of the same things? I mean, obviously it's Labour conference next week. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper will be making a speech. Do you have any hope that things will get better if there were to be a Labour government next year?
Politicians will play politics with policing. They always do. Whatever flavour, whatever aspect of the political spectrum they come from. And policing will always say, we want independence from politics. We want operational control over what we do. But the bottom line is, those senior officers who prowl the corridors of power, they love rubbing shoulders with politicians. And if you look at the current Metropolitan Police Commissioner, when he took his short break away from policing and wrote a lamentable book, he had a former Home Secretary endorse it on the front cover, which just goes to show what a ludicrous appointment he was, because he didn't have any political impartiality. So the police will say one thing and do something completely different. That is the senior police leaders. Meanwhile, the courageous men and women on the front line get trampled on, not only by the villains, but by managers who fail to support them and supervise them properly. They get disheartened. They're leaving in droves. Britain is becoming increasingly unsafe.
Is that something you agree with, folks listening and watching at home? GBviews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GBnews as well. Peter, leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your take on things, my friend, as the time creeps up to 6:15.
And if you have just joined us, a reminder that here on Breakfast on GB News, you can take us with you wherever you go, on TV, online and on your radio. And here's a reminder now of our top stories this morning.
Trans women will be banned from female hospital wards, one of the proposals to be announced by the Health Secretary today, in an aim to bring back, as he puts it, common sense to the health service.
The Prime Minister reportedly intends to axe the multi-billion-pound HS2 northern leg to Manchester, but with many of his own MPs and indeed party grandees against the idea, could a Tory civil war be brewing?
And the Justice Secretary says life means life. He wants to impose tougher sentences to deal with the worst crimes. We'll be asking about that live on the programme in half an hour's time.
Well, we're going to take a little look at the forecast for today. Here's Alex Deakin.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a soggy start for parts of East Anglia and the southeast. Generally a bright and breezy kind of day with a few showers around. But as I said, a pretty wet start for parts of East Anglia, the southeast. A lot of spray and surface water on the roads, but that is all clearing away. Then we'll see some sunshine coming through. Plenty of showers coming into western Scotland, still quite breezy here. And we'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers for northern England, North Wales and Northern Ireland. But much of the south and east will stay dry and bright with some sunshine. Temperatures getting into the mid to high teens. A fresher feel for most compared to yesterday. Still quite windy across northern Scotland especially. Breezy elsewhere. That breeze leads down overnight, so we'll see a few showers drifting in, but many places will stay clear, particularly across the south and the east. Later on, though, some more wet and windy weather will come in across the Highlands and the Western Isles. Temperatures will drop down into single figures in rural spots, so a fresh start to Wednesday for most. A bright start, though, tomorrow morning across much of the Midlands and eastern England. Quite a lot of cloud further north and west, and that rain could cause some problems. It continues to feed into western Scotland. That rain really building up as we go through the day and starting to edge further south, so perhaps arriving across parts of the central belt into Northern Ireland. For England and Wales, just a few scattered showers, mostly in the west. Many central and eastern parts will be dry and bright, and temperatures again in the mid to high teens.
Thunderstorms last night, thunder and lightning, very, very frightening, as Queen used to say.
I do quite like a thunderstorm, but I was a bit nervous yesterday.
Why?
Well, in my kitchen, it's a bit like an old barn, and it's got Velux windows up in the roof. And I did start wondering, could you get struck by lightning through the glass? Because I could kind of see it from where I was standing in the kitchen. And I was trying to be brave because we've got a little kitten, and the thunder was really loud, and I didn't want to scare the kitten or the children, to be fair. But I was scared.
Yes, I wouldn't like to test the theory whether lightning can go through glass or not. I suspect it can. Does glass conduct lightning.
I just thought I'd be the person that would get struck by lightning through glass. I just would. That would just be me. I would be the exception to the rule.
I reckon if you can see it, it's probably in danger. I tell you, if you live in, or if you did last night, an awful situation in Yarnton in Oxfordshire last night, and this massive fireball, look at that. Lightning struck a gas container at a power plant, a green power plant as well.
That's what I mean.
Well, that could have been your house last night.
My house.
You could have been in the middle of all of that.
I hope no one was hurt in this explosion. I mean, that looks pretty serious.
That was 7:20 last night.
Crikey.
So it was at the Severn Trent Green Power Plant at Cassington, north of Oxford, last night. So that's pretty scary. You want to avoid that.
Send us your storm stories if you were in the eye of the storm yesterday evening. And we've got a heat wave coming this weekend. 24 degrees, no less.
Variety is the spice of life.
Well,
and we've got Paul Coyd coming after the break, and he'll be talking about last night's West London derby next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
21 minutes past 6 o'clock. It is a Tuesday morning. This is Breakfast on GB News. Eamonn, Holmes, Isabel, Webster.
Let's take a look at some of the big stories coming into the newsroom this morning. And a second police force is now investigating allegations against the comedian Russell Brand. In a statement, Thames Valley Police confirmed it's received new information relating to harassment and stalking claims dating back to 2018. They added that officers are currently reviewing the information available. Russell Brand denies all allegations against him.
A civil fraud case against former President Donald Trump has begun in New York. He's accused of inflating the value of his assets by billions of dollars to secure better loan and insurance terms, one of a number of legal battles the former president is facing. And I think it's having an effect on him, because I noticed him yesterday, I thought he looked very haggard, very, very tired, but he
still
remains...
looks fitter and stronger than Biden to me, and he remains the front runner, doesn't he? He's in all the polls to be Republican.
It's there in his face. I just will get a chance to see better pictures maybe as the programme progresses. So he says he's a victim of the single biggest witch hunt of all time.
The Pope has given what he calls, cautious backing to the blessing of gay unions for the first time. This is a significant step away from the Catholic Church's traditional intolerance of homosexuality. The leader of the Catholic Church suggested there could be ways to bless same-sex unions as he responded to 5 Conservative cardinals who challenged him to affirm the Church's teaching on the issue.
Right. Let's get into the sports news. Paul Coit with us. I love how they call you broadcaster every day.
Yeah, me too. It's bizarre, isn't it?
It's bizarre.
Yeah, I know.
You're a broadcaster.
Yeah, I know. Well,
but like, it's pretty obvious that's what he does for a living, isn't it?
Listen, I've got a new sport. I've got a new sport. This is a big sport that's taken off in America. Stein holding.
You sure Harry Kane didn't send you that?
I know, that was it. And so this is what I'm thinking. It's October. Well, thank you very much. Yeah. It's Oktoberfest.
Of course it is.
It's that time of the year, and they do this in the States, and they fill the bit, and it's how long you can hold that out for.
It should be full, though, right?
Well, this is just the test.
Okay.
So I thought, and then apparently like 3 to 5 minutes. Would you like to have a go? There you go.
Yeah, do it for the whole bulletin, Eamonn.
So,
okay.
well, I was thinking the whole show.
Oh, I'll do it for the whole time Paul's talking.
Right, OK, so hold it out straight and away you go.
Which camera do you want me on? Right, I'll hold that whilst
OK, fine. OK, right, we're away. So, should we talk about Chelsea?
So they won last night?
They actually did win last night.
That was in the Premier League?
It was in the Premier League. They beat Fulham 2-0 at Craven Cottage. How are we doing? You still there?
I'm just fine.
I'll
let you know when I start to wobble.
Mikhailo Mudryk scored first goal he scored for Chelsea, 24 games. There's all the worry about Chelsea. You know, what on earth is going to happen? They've spent £1 billion. I don't think they need to worry too much. That's just lowered very slightly, by the way. I think they're going to
take them a long time, though, to get
through the bulletin, you mean?
Yeah.
It does seem rather slow.
We're making this last, by the way, for a very long time.
Talking about scoring goals, we mourned the passing of Francis Lee, who basically scored a goal every other game for his clubs or for England.
Yeah, I mean, Franny Lee's I'm not going to... I hate the phrase when people go, oh, they use the word legend too much, but, I mean, he truly was a legend. So Franny Lee passed away. Manchester City legend. I mean, I first saw him when he was playing at Derby County, I don't know, in the 70s. Are you still there?
Well, that was after City.
That was after Manchester City, and that was where there were some famous moments. One of them was the Barry Davis commentary. We go, look at his face, just look at his face, you're doing good, you're doing good. And then the other one was, of course, the fight that we mentioned with Norman Hunter, the swinging of the arms. Great character, so many goals for City, played for England as well, amazing businessman, and then ended up as chairman of Manchester City.
Are we done? I'm putting it down.
Right, put it down.
Can I?
OK,
that's good.
Put it
Well
down.
done. Good effort.
My.
Yeah. Good muscles.
Well, champion.
But you say amazing businessman. He made his fortune with toilet roll.
Yeah.
He manufactured toilet roll.
Does that not make him an amazing businessman?
That's an interesting way of making money.
Absolutely.
There'll always be a demand for it, won't there?
Well, I think there probably will always be a demand for it.
Do you know what my wife brought in? She has this idea, I don't know, to be more environmentally friendly, but she got brown toilet roll.
Oh, no. I draw the line at that.
That was disgusting.
Oh, I really like to throw, cash at loo roll.
Yeah.
It's one of the things in life that ought to be luxurious. The more velvety.
Yeah.
Why are we talking about this?
Do you know what I never really understand?
Oh.
You get certain toilet roll that's shiny.
That's the old school. That's the old school.
Oh, yeah, it's like paper.
Well, what's the point of that?
I have no idea.
Cheap.
I think you know what? I could try and explain it, but I had to self-edit as I was talking about it, so I decided not to.
Yeah.
Slippery, slidey.
Yeah, got it.
No purchase on that toilet roll.
God.
Anyway, condolences to Francis Lee's family then on all of that.
I have a feeling I may be able to do a better tribute a little bit
Who
later.
was the Holy Trinity when you at Manchester United Best Law and Charlton, at Manchester City?
There was Colin Lee, of course, and Mike Summerby.
Not Colin Lee.
Yeah.
Colin Bell.
Colin Bell. I'm thinking of the old Spurs player, Colin Lee.
Always
Colin
Spurs.
Lee. It just crept back into there. Colin Bell, the late, great Colin Bell. Mike Summerby, of course, is still with us.
Yes.
And he was there for the first game of the Champions League a week or so ago when he walked out with the trophy. So Mike Summerby, another true legend of Manchester City.
Yeah, OK.
Colin Lee.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. When you come back next time, what are we talking about?
We have plenty. We've got to talk about the Champions League. We've got Manchester City. And also, you're going to hold the...
I'd like to know how long you could... Did anyone time that? We need to watch it back, because I think I did about 4.5 minutes.
You did 4.5 minutes, but it wasn't full, though, was it?
32 seconds.
I reckon you couldn't do it for so long.
I'll give it a go.
You're up.
I'm going to fill it up next time.
Yes, it's a real manly version.
Yes. Thank you very much indeed.
Or maybe beer.
Next, we're going to be looking at how a passport database could help tackle property crime. That's with our headline makers next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Half past 6, a reminder of our top stories on this Tuesday morning.
Trans women are to be banned from female hospital wards. That's just one of the proposals to be announced by the Health Secretary today in an aim to bring back, as he puts it, common sense to the health service.
The Prime Minister reportedly intends to axe HS2 and the northern leg to Manchester. Many of his own MPs are coming out against the idea, leaving a Conservative civil war brewing.
And the Justice Secretary wants to retrospectively apply whole-life orders to the worst murderers. We'll be asking about that and quizzing him on some of the headlines coming out of the Conservative Party conference, and that's in around 15 minutes' time.
The headlines coming out of the Conservative Party conference are like their greatest hits. They just the same things, longer jail sentences.
Well, that's what they want everyone to be talking about, but then there's the stuff that's just crashing in, like HS2.
Benefit frauds.
Internal rows about
Yeah, but
tax.
it's the same stuff, it's the same rubbish every single year.
I don't think they'll be happy with how it's going. You know, the government, I would say.
Well, Sunak should put an end to all this talk and dragging on. Or if he would just come out and speak about it and say, is he axing it or not?
Should have done it last week ahead of the conference.
Yeah, ahead of the conference. So now he's in real trouble with that. So wonder what the reaction's going to be like when he announces it. When he's saying, but what people really want is, and you know, this idea that they'll take the money, if they haven't got the money for HS2, what have they got the money for? I mean, how can they actually then say they're going to spend money that they don't have on something else?
Yeah.
And also, as I keep pointing out, money goes into a central pot, so it does. So it's no point saying that the HS2 money will go to east-west.
North. No.
Yeah, they're not doing that, and they don't do that. The system's not like that. So, you know, whether you're in the care home sector or whether you're in, you know, NHS, whatever, you will say, I want a bit of that, where you're fixing potholes in roads, you'll say, I want a bit of that as well. So your view's very welcome on this this morning.
And as Eamonn said, the front page of the newspaper is pretty much dominated by various different angles coming out of Manchester. But the Daily Mirror with something different. They're leading with the football yob who made fun of Bradley Lowry, who died. And they're talking about his mother's anguish on the front of their paper this morning.
Times focuses on that HS2 situation, PM brings axe down. So it's been reported as fact on many news programmes and in newspapers and whatever, but nothing confirmed from the party hierarchy yet.
The Express, ever loyal to the Prime Minister, they say his plan to deliver a series of announcements will focus on what is best for Britain.
And the Eye says the Prime Minister faces growing Conservative backlash. Oh, yeah, repeat. Let's forget all
That's
these,
on
right?
HS2.
Let's forget all this. What we should say to you today, forget all that. Right, what we should say to you today is that one of our newspaper reviewers is not well and cannot make it today. So warming up, put his boots on, he's playing on the subs bench, Paul Coyte.
Yeah, we've just literally hauled him in from the newsroom, so don't be worried.
Yes.
We'll be kind.
OK, we're going to start with the back pages then, are we? We're going to just go with that and work our way back.
I'll tell you what we are going to start with. We're going to start with Derek Laud, who's the other reviewer this morning. And very nice to see you,
Morning.
Derek. Isabel's got a story that has been preying on her mind.
Well, actually, we're talking about all the different lines coming out of conference. Kemi Badenoch yesterday seems to be very popular. And she's been talking about how when she tucks her children into bed at night, she says to them, obviously black children, you should be grateful to be being brought up in Britain. There is no better place in the world to be black.
Well, it's a very good headline. It's obviously a very personal story and very peculiar to her. I mean, she was born in 1980. She comes from a middle-class family. Her father's a GP, her mother's a professor. So she started with what the sociologists call cultural capital. So her experience of living in the United Kingdom is going to be very different from somebody's experience of living in the United Kingdom if they were born into a working-class black family, for example.
In the 50s or 60s.
50s, 60s, 70s and so on. But I think, nonetheless, it's a kind of indication of how far we've come that she feels able to say that to her children, her next generation, as it were. But what I would say is that, only 3% of the UK population is black. We actually spend quite a lot of time exaggerating the problems that exist for black people in this country, I think, when the numbers are so small. But what I would also say...
well, you could say that. I wouldn't like to be non-black and make the same claim, of course, but you...
Well, Mrs Thatcher once said, you tell people the truth and then the people will be your judge. And I think I'm happy with that position.
Oh, I like that phrase.
I think that for most of us, we've advanced extremely well in this country. There are things about living here which is better than any other country in the world. For example, our judicial system, our rule of law, our democratic processes and the way in which we hold those people in authority to account. These are things that we should celebrate, really celebrate.
But Derek, can I ask you, Derek, I mean, you must have faced discrimination over the years. It's very easy I say it's very easy, it's very difficult, as Eamonn just mentioned, for us to discuss something like that because we've never grown up with what maybe you've had to go through when you were younger. So it must have changed over the years, but has it truly got better? Because a lot of people say it hasn't.
Well, I mean, I think that I had a personal experience that was actually informed by the person that I am, anyway. So the kind of discrimination that I might have faced was probably more about being posh than being black, for example.
But from who, though? From who was saying that to you?
Well, I mean, it wasn't just... It's not that people necessarily said anything, it was the way in which actually barriers were put in your way. But, I mean, I think that all these personal challenges, you overcome them by how you respond to them,
Whether it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger.
Kill you and so on and so forth, whether you're a woman, whether you're black, whether you're gay, whatever. It's how you personally respond
Derek,
to them that's the issue.
Can I ask you, what Kemi Badenoch yesterday said seems in complete contrast and at odds with what Suella Braverman said last week about multiculturalism failing and people living in silos in this country. Either it's a great place to be a minority person or it's not. And, which is it?
Yeah. Well, very good question, I have to tell you. My own view on this is that what Suella Braverman was really, I think, saying was that, you know, if you are born into this country, or indeed if you come here because you've come here for love, you come here for better opportunities and so on and so forth, the most important thing of all is that you actually have loyalty to British institutions, and that if you are British and you value this country for many different reasons, that you show loyalty to the rule of law, and that you cannot operate in some kind of ghetto, really. And I think that those are all reasonable points. I would, however, say that, you know, Kemi Badenoch and James Cleverly have both said that they disagree with Suella Braverman and that they think that multiculturalism has succeeded.
Interesting.
Paul, what do you have for your dinner? Do you have a regular, or do you have certain things? When I was young, we had certain things on certain days.
Yeah.
Like it was stew on a Monday, and it was...
Cold meat used to be cold beef on a Monday.
Yes, leftover from
salad
Sunday.
cream. Yeah, leftover from the with some salad cream. Yeah, absolutely.
So we've got a story here. We'd just like your opinion, and Derek will weigh in on this as well. That a woman has sparked outrage after pandering to her husband's dinner complaint. It doesn't tell me what...
It doesn't say where that is, or who's outraged by it. It sounds quite sweet.
I think that this is a video, viral video, isn't it? I don't think it's in any newspaper.
Is this a video, Ollie? Let's run it then. Let's have a look. So the thing is, this woman has catered to her husband's dinner demands by serving him nachos. Now, I'm not a nacho fan.
I love nachos.
Do you? No, I don't. So.
Hold on, what's going on the nachos there?
That looks like...
prawn cocktail sauce.
No, it's not. It would either be
Mary Rose sauce.
sour cream, or it would be a cheesy sauce.
But he doesn't look old enough to have a wife.
So hold on, does he have this every single day?
I haven't seen the man. Well, I don't know.
Oh, I thought that was the man. No, it's not.
Who's outraged? I haven't seen anything outrageous. Oh, my gosh, he's under a blanket as well.
And she's serving.
What does this tell you, Isabel?
This tells me that he is being mothered by his partner.
He looks like he's on the sofa. This is the thing when you're a kid and you're feeling unwell.
Yeah.
There was that you could either sleep in your mum and dad's bed, or if you were really lucky, you could sleep on the sofa with the duvet and then get to watch the TV. I think this is probably what he's doing all the time.
That's right.
Not with nachos, though, for crying out loud.
Yeah, but what's wrong with making your husband what they like every now and then? I think that's
agree.
quite nice. Come on.
Well, I had
as long as it's in return.
I had a lovely dinner at your house. My lasagna, apple crumble, and custard was lovely. I mean, what more could you want?
Oh, good.
Could be on the sofa with a duvet as well.
A duvet, yeah. We'd had that.
Did you cook it?
Yeah.
Next time, I'll get you a blanket. You can sit on the sofa.
Derek, a passport database of 45 million people is going to be used to match photos to shoplifters.
Yes, I mean, this is a very interesting story. It's on page 4, I think, of the Daily Mail. And the police and crime minister is actually responding to the growing calls from shopkeepers for help to deal with shoplifting. It's becoming a growing problem. Now, what he is saying, and what he said yesterday, was that they have 45 million people's photo ID on national computers, and they're going to try and use that to help the police
match up the CCTV
footage.
Is that basically one step closer to these ID cards that have been so controversially opposed for so long?
We're increasingly moving towards a society where more and more of our data, more and more of our identity, more and more of our images, more and more of our private lives actually being computerised. You know, the one thing I would say about this, which I think is pretty important to hold on to, is that most people always think that technology is the solution to all our problems today. But, you know, 8 million people don't have a passport in this country, or travel documents and so on and so forth. So you can be one of those 8 million, or many more than one of those 8 million, and commit crimes of this kind and go undetected.
They are.
Okay.
They are. Look, we're going to go to a break now. We've got Alex Chalk, who is the Justice Secretary. I'm going to be speaking to him from conference in Manchester right after this.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got the Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, live from conference this morning. Thanks for your time, Secretary, and good to see you. You want to increase the use of whole life orders, extending them to what?
Right, so this is to ensure that for those most serious offenders, life really should mean life. So that means that when a murder is committed and there is sexual or sadistic conduct in respect of that victim, that the judges will impose a whole life order. So that life should mean life, unless, of course, there are exceptional circumstances, but that will be the default result.
And you're going to be looking at this retrospectively, so there'll be a number of people who've already been sent to jail who potentially could see their sentences being significantly increased.
Well, so we should be clear, it's those who've been convicted but are yet to be sentenced. So there can be an element of retrospectivity to that extent. So that's important. And as I say, the point is that we want to ensure that there is confidence and certainty in sentencing, so that the public can know for these most appalling crimes, these most heinous offenders, that they do in fact get the punishment that keeps the British people safe and also meets the justice of the case.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say you'll find few people who will object to that.
But the question is, Secretary of State, why isn't that happening already?
Well, look, it does happen in respect of a number of particularly appalling murders, and there are people who are serving whole life orders. So you'll know, for example, Wayne Couzens is an example, but there are plenty of others as well. But what we want to do is to ensure that where that is the starting point, in other words, where that is the option that judges should be thinking about as an initial proposition, it now becomes the default. So it's what should happen, unless, of course, the judge decides there are exceptional circumstances. And we think that puts the law in the right place, that meets the instincts of the British people, and as I say, does justice and provides, a crumb of comfort for families after the most appalling crimes that they feel justice is truly being served.
You'll be announcing that formally in your speech a little bit later on, and there'll also be a big speech today from the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, front of the Telegraph this morning, talking about an interview that he's done today, that transgender women will be banned from female wards. Lots of people, again, may say that's a lot of common sense, but surely pretty trivial issue, and trying to create a distraction away from the fact. Here we are, day 2 of significant strikes in the NHS between junior doctors and consultants. And let's be honest, a conference that's completely overshadowed by what we expect to be the abolition of HS2 tomorrow.
Well, look, first of all, I don't think it's a trivial issue. I think it's important. I think patients want to know how the circumstances in which they're being treated. And I should say that in prisons, which I'm responsible for, we're very clear that those who are biological men with birth genitalia, or indeed who've been convicted of a serious offence of sex or violence, should not serve in the women's estate. And I think it's important. People need to understand, and people want reassurance that we are standing up for the rights of women.
Important,
and I think
but the numbers of people affected by that are absolutely tiny when you compare it with a million appointments being cancelled in the NHS and the billions of pounds that have been spent on HS2 already. It's a distraction. It's culture wars. It's just trying to say, oh, look over here. It's that good old-fashioned dead cat in the room.
No, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair. And by the way, it will not, of course, be the only thing that that the Health Secretary talks about. But I do think there are issues. People want to understand that we are clear-eyed and we're sensible and we're making common-sense decisions on these points. Now, as to the wider issues about strikes, our position there is very clear, that there is an offer on the table, which, incidentally, is the offer that has been proposed by the independent pay review body. So that's where you have individuals of total independence, of professionalism, of integrity, who make that recommendation. And in my area of prisons and probation, that is exactly the same approach that was taken. We listened to what the pay review body said, and we accepted every last penny of the recommendation. And I do think that's important to be clear about. We accepted it, and that's precisely what we've awarded in the prison sector.
You could ask, looking at the whole life orders, what would the point of parole be? And I'm thinking of John Venables, who's coming up for a parole hearing soon, one of the boys, now a man, who murdered Jamie Bulger. And you could look and you could say, everything you're talking about is geared towards a case like that life should mean life. So where does that leave parole? Will people ever get a fair crack of the whip with parole?
No, so the whole point about whole life orders is there is no option for that. So what it effectively means is that individual must die in prison. So the point about parole is there are certain cases where if that individual can persuade the parole board that they are no longer a danger to the public, then they should be able to get out, albeit on life license, so that if they commit an offence, they're straight back inside. But there is a certain number of cases, we think, it's where there is sexual or sadistic conduct as part of the murder, and you can think, of course, about the appalling Sarah Everard case and others, where life should mean life, and they shouldn't have the prospect of parole, because that is the only, it is only by doing that you truly do justice to the horror of that particular case.
I'm almost reticent to ask you more further on HS2, just because I've seen a number of ministers over, let's be honest, more than a week now, really squirming and trying to avoid the question. We all know it's going to be axed, this northern leg, right? And I just want to hear an honest answer from a senior politician involved in this. Are you embarrassed? Is HS2 an emblem of shame for you?
No, absolutely not. And I'll tell you this, although this course is a decision for the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, I sit opposite the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, in the Cabinet room when we look at things like the Illegal Migration Act. So that's how you give effect to the Rwanda legislation. And I see in someone who's the best briefed person in the room, who goes through the detail calmly,
I didn't ask you about the Prime Minister's credentials. I asked you whether you were embarrassed and ashamed about HS2 being cancelled.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that decision has been made. That decision hasn't been made. You asked about embarrassment. What I'm not embarrassed about is this Prime Minister does the right thing on the basis of the evidence, coolly, calmly, unemotionally. And I think that is the right approach. I think that's the only way that you do justice by the people of this country, the taxpayers of this country, to follow the evidence, and that's what he does.
OK, Alex Chalk, Secretary of State for Justice and the Lord Chancellor, thanks very much for your time this morning. Good luck with your speech this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, there you go, your views, welcome. GB Views, GB News, what the heck is it? What is it?
GBViews at gbnews.com.
That anyway. There it is up on your screen, gbviews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GB News as well.
I just got to ask the panel, whilst they're still here, their thoughts on HS2. Does anyone else just want to scream at the telly? I mean, you were saying yesterday this absolute repeat line about spades in the ground makes you want to tear your hair out.
There are spades in the ground, but he's going to pull them out of the ground, isn't he?
The only thing I would say about HS2 and Rishi Sunak in particular, which I think is really important that nobody's saying, is that basically Rishi Sunak's lost control of number 10 Downing Street and the Transport Department, because the only reason why this week he's on the back foot is because there have been 2 leaks about HS2 that have undermined him. And he planned to make this statement on Wednesday. He's not been allowed to because somebody close within his circle, inside number 10, or the Department of Transport, is undermining him.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think he wanted to make it in Manchester at all. I think they wanted conference over and get back to London.
Yeah, I think he wanted Jeremy Hunt to have to deliver that in the autumn statement. The Lib Dems yesterday saying that Sunak's making Liz Truss look like a political genius.
Well, I don't think that we should take any advice from the Liberal Democrats.
What do you make of Liz Truss, what's the word, arising like Lazarus from the dead?
Hottest ticket in town yesterday.
Yeah.
To fall like Lucifer, never to rise again, and that's not happening in her case. And I think many more people wished it would. Because, I mean, I think it's true to say that Liz Truss has had her chance, and she blew it. She was in complete...
Would somebody tell her that?
I think we're going to send you out there to tell her, Eamonn.
I would happily tell her.
Because I saw journalists right across the spectrum yesterday all saying, well, it's the busiest room at conference. My goodness me, isn't she popular? And I was just like, is everyone stupid? The reason this room is packed is because everyone's here to see what she's going to say.
And the reason
how
we can't
much front
afford
she's got
HS2
after crashing the
is that
economy.
she crashed the economy.
Well, quite.
Exactly.
So, I don't think the fact that the room was full is necessarily an indication of her popularity.
Let me ask you a question. I mean, this is from the outside. I mean, we can talk about politics from the inside, and then we stand on the outside, and I'll probably be one of those people that be looking at it thinking, how has this happened? Is this down to her, or is this down to people around her that are thinking, right, we're going to push you forward again, and this is going to be the future? Because it's not surely just something you can do on your own, and suddenly after what happened to her before, and then they get this new popularity again.
Yeah, I mean, I think
does
she's
it?
Jostling for leader, possibly, once they lose the...
Well, I think the problem with Liz Truss is that she does actually listen to her own opinion. I think if she actually canvassed more widely, I think she would actually get rather sensible advice. And I think that this mantra probably was something that she would have been wise to adhere to inside number 10 Downing Street, because the problem was that there were only 2 or 3 people that she would listen to.
Well, except
She's very
the Tory Party
strong-minded.
faithful who appointed her as leader. We're at 80,000 people, and a huge number of them at conference, and really still rate her.
I think that that is true, and it has to be said that the central message that she has is really right, but she's just the wrong person to deliver it. I mean, we do need to have tax cuts. It's a question of when and how you do it. You know, the problem for Liz Truss is that she's got a plan around cutting taxes, but she hasn't got a plan around how you finance the cuts.
Derek, would you cut HS2?
Oh, undoubtedly, it would never have started. Well, for a number of different reasons now. The first is that this announcement was first made in 2009. Then the predicted cost for HS2 was £15 billion.
But once you start
£15 billion.
It's the waste of the money that you've already invested.
Yes, but the cost that we're now talking about is in excess of £200 billion. Now, it is true to my mind that it's been a dereliction of duty, and it's a grotesque chaos that we find ourselves in, which actually goes to the heart of the fact that the civil service are not as good as people think that they are, because the mess that we're in is slightly related to the way in which procurement is done in this country, and the civil service
it's not just about a high-speed rail line. It is about a Victorian infrastructure that we seem to be happy to maintain between London and Manchester, something that was constructed in the Victorian age. It just strikes me that there's not a national determination to bring this country in line with France or Japan or Germany or...
Eamonn, these are extremely laudable things to want to achieve. Nobody's saying that it will never be done. It's a question of when you do it. You know, you've got to remember, and nobody talks about this, the national debt in this country is phenomenal.
Trillions.
It's 235 trillion. It's costing us £9.3 billion a day to service that debt. We cannot afford HS2. That is the reality. And Rishi Sunak is doing us all a favour as taxpayers by telling us that we can only spend what we can afford.
Just very quickly, Eamonn, just had my bathroom done and had an in-wash toilet installed. No more toilet roll required for me, and another one on toilet roll.
I'm not sure I would trust that, though.
Talking about tracing
You would need an
as well.
inspection, wouldn't you, before you could leave the room? Anyway, let's go to Alex Deakin. Here he is.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a soggy start for parts of East Anglia and the southeast. Generally a bright and breezy kind of day with a few showers around. But as I said, a pretty wet start for parts of East Anglia, the southeast. A lot of spray and surface water on the roads, but that is all clearing away. Then we'll see some sunshine coming through. Plenty of showers coming into western Scotland, still quite breezy here. And we'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers for northern England, North Wales and Northern Ireland. But much of the south and east will stay dry and bright with some sunshine. Temperatures getting into the mid to high teens. A fresher feel for most compared to yesterday. Still quite windy across northern Scotland especially. Breezy elsewhere. That breeze leads down overnight. So we'll see a few showers drifting in, but many places will stay clear, particularly across the south and the east. Later on, though, some more wet and windy weather will come in across the Highlands and the Western Isles. Temperatures will drop down into single figures in rural spots, so a fresh start to Wednesday for most. A bright start, though, tomorrow morning across much of the Midlands and eastern England. Quite a lot of cloud further north and west, and that rain could cause some problems. It continues to feed into western Scotland. That rain really building up as we go through the day and starting to edge further south, so perhaps arriving across parts of the central belt into Northern Ireland. For England and Wales, just a few scattered showers, mostly in the west. Many central and eastern parts will be dry and bright, and temperatures again in the mid to high teens.
A very good morning to you. It is 7 o'clock, or just about to turn 7 o'clock on Tuesday, the 3rd of October.
I'm just laughing at comments coming from a viewer there. We were talking about toilet paper and how a footballer, Francis Lee, had made his fortune manufacturing toilet paper. But she said, this is why I love...
Yeah, Vivian says, how hilarious the conversation this morning on toilet paper. Yet another reason why I love GB News, no holds barred.
Do you think she just said that deliberately? Anyway, no holds barred at all. Thank you.
It's Eamonn and Isabel with you this morning. Here's what's leading our programme today.
Trans women will be banned from female hospital wards. One of the proposals to be announced by the Health Secretary today in an aim to bring back, as he puts it, common sense to the health service.
Yes, indeed. The Conservative Party seems to be delivering more and more wedge issues between itself and the Labour Party, with a senior government source confirming to me that this policy is indeed going to be announced later today, a consultation leading to, in the view of the government, change in the way that transgender individuals are treated on NHS wards. More to follow.
Tom, thank you. Despite calls from his own MPs to stick with the HS2 rail project, there are now reports that the Prime Minister is going to axe the multi-billion-pound project's final leg to Manchester, but push any senior government minister for an answer, and you won't get a straight one. The Justice Secretary just told Breakfast this a few moments ago.
So I'm not sure that decision has been made. That decision hasn't been made. You asked about embarrassment. What I'm not embarrassed about is this Prime Minister does the right thing on the basis of the evidence, coolly, calmly, unemotionally.
After the Chancellor called yesterday for a clampdown on benefit claimants who refuse to look for work, later on the programme we'll be debating whether now is the right time to get tough on handouts.
And Alex Deakin, after a stormy day yesterday, will have your all-important forecast.
Bit of a wet start in places this morning, but most of us will have a bright and breezy day. There'll be some sunshine. There will also be a fair few showers. Join me later for a full forecast.
And joining in 20 minutes' time, Paul Coit with the sport.
I was just texting Tom, actually, there. Chelsea win a game of football. Is Luke Donald going to stay on as Ryder Cup captain? We hope so. And also the loss of a legend at Manchester City. We'll talk about him too.
OK, my friend, thank you. And what you have to say, all important, gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet or X or whatever it's called at GBNews.
Well, our top story this morning, all the latest from Manchester. A Tory civil war appears to be brewing. More reports now of imminent axing of that Manchester leg of the HS2 project.
So, latest reports saying the Prime Minister will confirm the decision tomorrow. So, in a bid to save billions of pounds in rising costs and instead invest in local infrastructure in the north of England.
Well,
do you believe that? How far will that go?
Well, earlier we pushed for confirmation of that from the Justice Minister, Alex Chalk. Almost reticent to ask you more further on HS2, just because I've seen a number of ministers over, let's be honest, more than a week now, really squirming and trying to avoid the question. We all know it's going to be axed, this northern leg, right? And I just want to hear an honest answer from a senior politician involved in this. Are you embarrassed? Is HS2 an emblem of shame for you?
No, absolutely not. I tell you this, although this, of course, this is a decision for the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, I sit opposite the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, in the Cabinet room when we look at things like the Illegal Migration Act. So that's how you give effect to the Rwanda legislation. And I see in someone who's the best briefed person in the room, who goes through the detail calmly,
I didn't ask you about the Prime Minister's credentials. I asked you whether you were embarrassed and ashamed about HS2 being cancelled.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that decision has been made. That decision hasn't been made. You asked about embarrassment. What I'm not embarrassed about is this Prime Minister does the right thing on the basis of the evidence, coolly, calmly, unemotionally. And I think that is the right approach. I think that's the only way that you do justice by the people of this country, the taxpayers of this country, to follow the evidence, and that's what he does.
And eventually he's going to make an announcement on this. Tom Harwood, when do you think he really wanted to make that announcement? Was it this week? Was it last week? Will it be in a few weeks' time? But it sounds as if he's going to have to make the announcement tomorrow.
It seems like this is going to be a central point of the Prime Minister's big conference speech tomorrow, which is peculiar, perhaps, given that this is a speech being made in Manchester, indeed a speech being made in a former train station in Manchester. After all, that's the conference convention centre that we're currently sitting in, a former train station that closed down in the 1960s. Well, ending another train line on its way to Manchester might not be the most fitting thing for the Prime Minister to announce in this city, but it seems like we're all waiting on tenterhooks for that speech tomorrow. It does lead ministers like Alex Chalk to be on the ropes there, desperately trying to pivot away from questions asked, and it has made the last 3 days here in Manchester at the Conservative Party conference slightly peculiar, because this has been hanging over the heads of government for quite some time. But it does seem that despite what senior ministers say, this is a decision that has been made, and they're just waiting for the Prime Minister to announce it. That's all the indication that we've received behind the scenes, nods and winks rather than clear indications, of course. But after all, the message and the pitch rolling that has been going on has been about taking cost-effective decisions. Let's have a listen to what Michael Gove told Camilla Tominey only this weekend.
I agree that we've been too London-centric in the past, and that's why we have a long-term plan for levelling up with lots of different
So you must
ingredients
think that
in it.
HS2 should go to Manchester then?
Well, I think levelling up involves doing many more things
Give us
than
your
just
position on
transport
that. Should it go to
infrastructure.
Manchester?
Well, I think we need to make sure that we're getting absolute value for money
Mr. Gove,
from it.
come on, you must be able to have an opinion on whether it should go to Manchester or not.
I absolutely think the most important thing is making sure that when we level up, we take into account all of the things that we need to do. So we've shifted Arts Council funding.
I know, but should it go to Manchester,
research
yes
and
or no?
development funding. Well, we're going to have to...
Should it? Not will it?
We're going to
should
have
it?
to look at every conceivable pound that we spend on transport in order to make sure that we get value for money
still not
from
an
it.
answer to the question whether you think it should
my
go
answer
to
to the
Manchester.
question.
All right.
There's another one not answering the questions now, Tom. So the other thing we want to talk to you about is transgender women to be banned from female hospital wards. So this is screaming out, front page headline in the Telegraph.
That's right, and I've confirmed this story with some senior government sources this morning. A little bit more detail for you on it. The ministers are going to be consulting on a change to the NHS constitution, indeed, that, in the words of the government, would enshrine women's rights around this sort of stuff. But it is interesting, of course, there are those that are deeply critical of the government's path here, because, after all, how many individuals does this really affect on NHS wards? That's something that the government hasn't been able to clarify at this stage. However, a government source has told me that this is about taking a common sense approach, in their words, to sex and equality issues. It's important that male and female wards are protected, and requests to have intimate care are provided by someone of the same sex, and those requests are respected. That's what the government's line is this morning. However, of course, there will be those who say, how much of an issue is this, and are we really going to see transgender women who perhaps have gone through a full transition ending up on a male ward? What exactly, how exactly will this work? No doubt more questions will be raised as a result, but yes, I can reveal that the government will be consulting on a change indeed to the very constitution of the NHS on this issue, and no doubt this is another issue that the government has found to try and create some clear blue water between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. Perhaps we can see this announcement in the same vein as we saw those announcements on a delay to net zero targets and the question marks over spending on HS2. Perhaps there's yet another issue that the government is finding a change in direction on and enabling Rishi Sunak to paint himself as a change candidate rather than someone who is pursuing continuity.
Tom, appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. We'd like now to go to Brendan Chilton. Brendan is a Labour councillor in Kent, Stanhope Ward in Kent. And what did that say about County Durham? What did that? I get that completely. He's a no, he's not. See, I'm making all this up, Brendan. So you're actually a Labour councillor in County Durham, yes?
I can be a councillor from wherever you want.
No, yeah.
Well, I don't know. The way the info comes in this place, I have no idea. But I'll tell you this, Brendan. Right, so your party conference, the Labour Party conference next week, right, all to come. Are you sitting back? Are you sitting back just, you know, making your snowballs ready to fire them? Are you enjoying this? What's your view of what you're seeing so far from the Conservatives?
Well, Labour certainly shouldn't be complacent. I mean, we are only 12 to 13 points ahead in the polls. But I would just say this. We've got school roofs crumbling. No one can see a GP. The economy is stagnating, and now they're cancelling critical infrastructure. And all the government can talk about is banning transgender women from hospital wards. Frankly, it's pathetic. The country is facing multiple crises. We've got a Home Secretary sounding off to try and get headlines. Even the former Home Secretary and the current Foreign Secretary have criticised her. Frankly, this government appears to be on the rocks, and we're just waiting for it to go so we can get a government that will actually deal with the people's priorities.
Andy Burnham's echoed those thoughts, describing the decision on HS2 or anticipated decision as disrespect off the scale and a desperate act of a dying government. My question is, would Labour have kept HS2's northern leg?
Yeah, we're just saying, Brendan, we were just trying to say, do you think Labour, what would Labour's intentions be with HS2 if this decision wasn't made for them? Is Brendan's line open, guys?
We've lost him, but that's OK. We will try and re-establish connections there, and in the meantime move on to another big speech that's coming from Manchester today, this time from the Home Secretary. What is it, a week on now since she made that huge speech in Washington last week, talking about how multiculturalism has failed and calling for the end of that UN Convention on Human Rights. Well, today she's set to make her big speech at conference, and one of the key figures, of course, in the Tory party, some people say angling, perhaps, for Rishi Sunak's job.
OK. Policing numbers is the subject. Crime rates and untackled law breaking set to be top of her concerns. Pip Thompson with this.
Home Secretary Suella Braverman will speak at the Conservative Party conference later as the government tries to get to grips with some of the issues affecting the country. It comes as record numbers of police officers quit the force and knife crime continues to rise. In the year to March, 4,668 officers left after a voluntary resignation, against a backdrop of 48,204 knife crime offences. That's a 5% increase on March last year. Immigration is another challenge the government hopes to tackle, as GB News data reveals that more than 25,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year. Something else on the Home Secretary's agenda is the rather contentious Rwanda plan, set for a battle at the Supreme Court next week. Speaking in Washington, D.C., Suella Braverman argued that the 1951 Refugee Convention is too loose and hinted that the government could leave the ECHR.
Any attempt to reform the Refugee Convention will see you smeared as anti-refugee. Similar epithets are hurled at anyone who suggests reform of the ECHR or its court in Strasbourg. I reject the notion that a country cannot be expected to respect human rights if it is not signed up to an international human rights organisation.
The Home Secretary is expected to use her speech in Manchester to boost her popularity ratings among the more right-wing arm of the party. Ahead of a general election, many backbenchers fear they could lose. So, are we looking at a future Tory leader? One wouldn't bet against it. Pip Thompson, GB News.
Here's David Haig. David's a human rights lawyer on all of this. David, good morning to you.
Yeah, sure.
The Home Secretary, of course, she can talk and she can make pronouncements. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay, David?
Yes, no, I can hear you fine.
Good man, good man. The Home Secretary can say all she wants, but how will she be able to act on what she is saying, because she's still bound by the European Court of Human Rights?
I think that's the thing. I mean, as you mentioned, there's a battle coming up. Basically, next week we're going to have the time when the European Court of Human Rights is going to, the Supreme Court is going to look into the Rwanda plan. So that will be early next week. And as we know, I'm just having issues here. Apologies. Apologies about that. So next week, basically, you're going to see the Supreme Court look into the Rwanda policy. Of course, in the Court of Appeal, the government lost their the situation. So that will happen early next week.
And obviously, we can't speculate about which way that's going to go, but it will be a pivotal moment, because we can anticipate, if that is unfortunate and unsuccessful from the government's point of view, they're going to ramp up the pressure to pull out of the ECHR. Do you buy the argument that Suella Braverman was making in Washington, D.C. last week, that actually, just because you leave the ECHR doesn't mean you're going to abandon your commitment to human rights? You look at countries like Canada, New Zealand, America, none of whom have signed up to it, all of whom abide by an international kind of code of ethics.
Hi, so I can't actually hear anything. Sorry.
That's OK. We're having a bit of a shocker there.
Don't worry, David.
Sorry, David. Hey, we will reconnect with him, perhaps.
What we're going to do is go back to our councillor, our Labour councillor, Brendan Chilton, on all of this, who is talking to us from County Durham today. Technological nightmare for us today, Brendan. So where were we last time? We were talking about what were we
Well, we were just saying, would Labour have scrapped the northern leg of HS2?
That's exactly what we were saying.
Of course, under Labour, all railways would work on time and they would be a fantastic...
Well, exactly. You know...
But as far as I'm aware, it is Labour's policy to, at the moment, to maintain the current high-speed line. I do believe that the Labour Party are also going to be looking at the expansion of rail across the North and the Midlands, because getting from one side of the country to the other is an absolute nightmare. You can get from north to south in half the time it takes to get from east to west. And so as part of Labour's own levelling up agenda, I think there'll be announcements next week at the party conference.
So rather than cut back on rail lines, you're actually saying they're the future. We should be investing in them.
Well, I think more and more people are travelling by rail now than ever before. There was a slight dip during the pandemic when we were all forced to stay at home. But rail is convenient, it's greener as well. And of course, with the cost of petrol and diesel at the moment, I think it's probably cheaper to travel on rail than it is perhaps to drive.
But give us an insight, Brendan, you know, where you are in the east of the country there in Durham, if I've got that right. What would it be like for you?
Oh, he's in Kent.
He's in Kent?
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Stephen and Brenton, I'm really sorry about this. Somebody needs to get their head around a bit of geography in this place. So wait a minute, you're in Kent, yes?
Yes.
Right, okay, I thought, right,
Correct.
okay. So what is the geography like being in Kent? Does that work for you, okay? Rail lines being connected to the southeast, southwest, northwest, northeast. Does that all work for you?
Well, it does. We're very lucky. We have High Speed 1, and it has been transformational for all the Kent towns that it goes through. It's brought investment, there's been growth in the number of houses and the retail offer in the area as well. The ludicrous thing, of course, is that High Speed 1 does not connect up to High Speed 2. I don't know who's responsible for the national infrastructure planning in this country, but they deserve to be taken out, and I won't say put up against a wall, but certainly fired, because the connectivity of services in this country, the speed at which we get these things built and done, it's an absolute disgrace. When you go to places like Germany, France and China, they're miles ahead of us, and this is the country that brought the world the Industrial Revolution and railways. It's really quite depressing to see how far we're falling down league tables when it comes to issues like this.
Brendan, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate your take. Sorry for the technical disorders throughout all of that, but maybe we'll speak again sometime. For the moment, Labour Councillor Brendan Chilton, thank you very much indeed.
And whether you are in Durham or indeed in Kent...
Never mind that. Wait a minute. Not going on. Wait a minute. We'll talk about trains.
That's quite a fun little link, that was.
Yes, it was a fun link, but you should contain your excitement.
All right.
Right. So what I'm saying is, I think what Brendan's really hit the nail on the head there is the lack of desire to invest in the future and science and technology in this country, I just think is completely embarrassing.
I actually reckon if Rishi Sunak was here, he would refute that. I think he would probably say, Boris, perhaps even some of his other predecessors should have scrapped HS2 a long time ago. This was apparent that it was going to be expensive. And he's the one who's really pushing AI, and he's hosting this international conference here in London this autumn. That's his big thing. That's technology. AI is the future. So, you know, you could argue...
Well, AI doesn't... Unless you're going to put you in a transport machine like Star Trek and send your molecules to Glasgow...
Sometimes I wish I could.
Yes, well, you know, so you still need to get around the country, and there still needs to be an infrastructure for that. And we are just abandoning it. And the thing is, there's always these rises, Isabel. Every modern facility that we've tried to build in this country, everybody says, oh, it's too dear, it's too expensive, we can't do that, and whatever. But then we just...
the taxes we're all paying, we've got people, nurses,
and do you think our tax is going to go down?
50%.
Do you think our tax is going to go down if they get rid of HS2? Of course it's not. Of course it's not.
Oh, it's all so depressing.
It is so depressing.
We've got something cheerful to tell us in the forecast.
Okay.
Let's have a look.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a soggy start for parts of East Anglia and the South East. Generally a bright and breezy kind of day with a few showers around. But as I said, a pretty wet start for parts of East Anglia, the South East. A lot of spray and surface water on the roads, but that is all clearing away. Then we'll see some sunshine coming through. Plenty of showers coming into Western Scotland, still quite breezy here. And we'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers for Northern England, North Wales and Northern Ireland. But much of the south and east will stay dry and bright with some sunshine temperatures getting into the mid to high teens. A fresher feel for most compared to yesterday. Still quite windy across northern Scotland especially. Breezy elsewhere. That breeze leads down overnight. So we'll see a few showers drifting in, but many places will stay clear, particularly across the south and the east. Later on though, some more wet and windy weather will come in across the Highlands and the Western Isles. Temperatures will drop down into single figures in rural spots, so a fresh start to Wednesday for most. A bright start though tomorrow morning across much of the Midlands and eastern England. Quite a lot of cloud further north and west, and that rain could cause some problems. It continues to feed into western Scotland. That rain really building up as we go through the day and starting to edge further south, so perhaps arriving across parts of the central belt into Northern Ireland. For England and Wales, just a few scattered showers, mostly in the west. Many central and eastern parts will be dry and bright, and temperatures again in the mid to high teens.
Now, stay with us. Still to come, we're going to be debating whether it's time to get tough on benefits. The
Again?
Chancellor thinks it is.
Are there any benefits left? Right, we'll talk about that. If you're on benefit and you've got a story to tell on it, let us know.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening. from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At conference yesterday, Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, he was talking about cracking down on benefits. This is what he had to say.
Around 100,000 people are leaving the labour market every year for a life on benefits. Mel Stride gets this 100%, which is why he's replacing the work capability assessment. And we're going to look at the way the sanctions regime works. It isn't fair that someone who refuses to look seriously for a job gets the same as someone trying their best.
Well, that was Jeremy Hunt speaking yesterday. Today, we're asking, is he right? Let's get the thoughts of the former Labour advisor, Mike Buckley, who obviously disagrees. And we'll also speak to the medical clinician, Eamonn, who says we should actually get tougher on benefits. Good morning to both of you. If I could go to you first of all, Mike. You profoundly then disagree with what the Chancellor had to say. You think that it's OK that 100,000 people a year decide to leave the workforce for a life on benefits?
Well, we need to think about why those people are leaving the labour market, first and foremost. But to go back to what Jeremy Hunt says, I mean, this is a carbon copy of what George Osborne was saying a decade ago. This is a Conservative Chancellor attempting to get votes by saying we're going to be tougher on benefit claimants than the Labour Party. Clearly thinking there's a cohort of voters out there who will think, yeah, let's get the benefit claimants because that's going to make the country better. They're trying to shift the blame. Osborne was doing it 10 years ago. They've then shifted on to doing it with asylum seekers and migrants. This is a government that's done a terrible job. I mean, think about it. Has anything got better in the last 13 years? And now they're trying to shift the blame onto benefit claimants again. Benefit claimants have had a terrible time. I was just reading this morning. We've got 4 million kids now in poverty. That's gone up about double, I think, since the Labour Party left office. Labour was going to end child poverty by 2020. We now have 120,000 children in extreme poverty. That's in households where they can't afford to heat their homes. They can hardly afford to heat. They certainly can't afford to buy shoes that fit for their kids. This is in Britain, a modern democracy. But to go back to those 100,000, assuming that figure is correct, my understanding is that most of those people are over 50. Most of those people are unwell. They're unwell for 2 reasons. One, because a lot of them are getting long COVID, about which the government is doing nothing. They're also unwell because we've got an NHS that's in crisis and a waiting list of 8 million. So these are not necessarily people that don't want to be in work. They're simply people who cannot be in work due to ill health because they're living in a country without a decent health system.
Mike got a point there. I'm always a bit cautious of passing judgment on this because I haven't ever lived off benefits, and I don't think I'd like to put it to the test. Have you ever lived off benefits?
No, I haven't. I've always, been brought up with the principles to work and, to be able to provide. And, if you don't work, then obviously there's certain things that, you would have to do. You have to make sacrifices. Drawing on a lot of the points that, Mike made, I think it's this people politics that I don't like, this kind of grouping everybody together. Not everybody who claims benefits are the same. There is this kind of understanding that the government is responsible for everybody on benefits and everybody who claims, and that's simply not true. Where we need to go back to the understanding that we as individuals have to take some responsibility to claim that, there's so many children in poverty, but where is the personal responsibility? Where is the responsibility of the parent? Why is it the government's, responsibility to look after so many of these children in poverty? We do have to break down the system. We have to look at the benefit system, and because at this moment in time, parents are just not responsible. And then it's this idea that, well, if the government is paying for children, then the government can also tell you what to do with your children. And it's just wrong. Right. We need to teach families how to look after your own family, your own children. We need to bring back the standard, the structure of family stability, where you are the mum and father are responsible for raising the children, going out to work, maybe mothers in the home. I'm a strong supporter that mothers should be in the home looking after the children. And we need fathers to be able to provide.
Gosh,
the government
okay.
with that.
Well, look, Mike, Izzy seems to go quite a bit further than the Chancellor would. I mean, he was trying to invoke Churchill yesterday, talking about nobody in society should be languishing at the bottom. There's a ladder there for those people in poverty. But Izzy's talking about, you know, basically blaming people for being in poverty and taking responsibility for it themselves.
Well, I wasn't entirely clear on what Izzy was suggesting. I mean, at 1 minute she seemed to be suggesting that everybody should go out to work, and the next minute she was suggesting that women should be stuck in the house and taking care of children. And I think maybe Izzy wants to be clearer what she wants. But her central premise that parents should be taught to take care of their kids, I don't think for a minute that these people living in poverty are not trying to take care of their kids. Of course they are. That's their number one responsibility. And I mean, you probably the same as I have. You'd have seen interviews in recent months. You'd have read news stories in recent months with parents saying, you know, I'm only eating once a day so that I can feed my kids. Or I'm eating, you know, I'm only having like 2 meals a day, 3 days a week so that I can feed my kids. Parents are making terrible, terrible choices because of the poverty they're in, because benefits aren't paying enough. Often, actually, these are people who are also in work and doing 1 or 2 zero-hours jobs or very low-rate, low-paid jobs, so that they can do the best that they can to feed their kids. They're often in circumstances that, to be fair, all of us on this call have never experienced and almost certainly never will experience.
But Izzy, you just believe this whole benefit system is broken and people are swinging the lead on it. People are being encouraged, in your view, to get on benefits. Couples, you would say, are pretending they're not together. They avoid getting married because they get more benefits as a result. The state is almost discouraging people from getting married, and that must change because you say marriage is the bedrock of society, not social welfare.
Correct. I mean, it's going back to what Mike said about me being unclear. I'm not saying everyone should, as if the premise should be that you work and provide for your families. Obviously, as a single person, I would be working. As somebody, as a mother, yes, I do believe mothers should be looking after their children. We're paying constantly other people to look after our own children, constantly worrying at work, trying to split ourselves in halves. When in fact, you know, these children have fathers. The government are not these children's fathers. To say that people are making horrible sacrifices, but without addressing why are people making these horrible sacrifices? Why are so many people in poverty? And it is because if you look in a lot of these homes, there aren't fathers in the homes. There's hardly even mothers in the homes. When the mother is having to work 2 jobs and she's not there for when her children get home from school, it is a problem. You know, and that is the problem. We can't blame the government for that. We have to go back to understanding that marriage is what we should be teaching our children. And this kind of is an old-fashioned view. But it's not, because we still have a view that somebody should do it. But what you're saying is that the government should be everybody's husbands and everybody's mothers.
OK. Izzy Montague is a parent and a medical clinician. Thank you very much indeed. Mike Buckley, journalist and former Labour advisor. Really appreciate your thoughts and contributing to that debate. Appreciate it. Thank you. You're right. Why? I mean, it's an interesting thing that it's always about what can the government pay for? What do we ever... There's never about wealth creation in this country. It's always about what we can pay.
I don't think anyone, not even the government, is questioning whether there should be a welfare state. I think everyone accepts that if you're in a civilised society, you've got to try and do something to support those that are the poorest. Maybe Izzy doesn't agree with that, but, you know, certainly it's a debate to be had how far that support should go and, you know, to make sure that people aren't taking advantage of that. I think that's the key.
And also just generally, men who avoid paying for their children, paying for their partners, you know, whoever is the highest... I
don't understand this men versus women thing. I mean, there's...
Well, there's a lot of fathers that just desert their responsibilities and aren't there and don't support the children that they have created and brought into the world. But goodness me, is it a financial thing? Is it a social thing? Is it a moral thing? Your view's very, very welcome. There it is on screen.
Now here to lighten the mood, cheer us all up, the broadcaster, Paul Coit.
The broadcaster. How are you?
Yeah, good.
Arsenal will be travelling to Lens. Actually, they've already travelled to Lens in France, but the thing is they were stuck on the aeroplane for 5 hours.
Why?
Waiting to fly. Well, because there were storms yesterday.
Oh,
so to fly from Luton, I think it's probably, what, 200, 300 miles?
Oh, they were stuck in Luton for 5 hours.
They could, well, on a plane for 5 hours, probably a luxury plane, but the thing is, the time that if they'd have just gone on the coach and just
They'd have been
driven
there.
over there. They would have been there. They would have been relaxed. They would sit, but they feel that they have to fly this distance. There's a lot of clubs that will do that. You know, it's like the old days. They would take the coach wherever, whereas now you probably fly across London to get the team.
Yeah, well, it preserves their energy and everything, doesn't it?
Bless them. Bless them.
I've been on a plane between Belfast and London that was hit by lightning twice.
But is that safe, though? We were discussing this earlier. With a lightning... Because in a car is the safest place to be hit by lightning, I believe.
Well, the plane isn't earthed on the ground, so it's, I think it's OK. The lightning passes through it. I mean, it was a big thud. It was a big thud twice.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Well, Arsenal didn't get involved in that, so they stayed on the ground. Manchester United, home to the Turkish legendary side Galatasaray.
Yeah.
So Jim Radcliffe, now this... Oh, dear. How long have we been talking about Manchester United being sold? Now, the latest talk is that the Glazers may be selling 25%. There's Sir Jim Radcliffe there, the man behind
That's
Ineos.
No progress at all, is it?
Well, I mean, he's got his hands in so many sporting pies. It's Manchester United is the one that he really wants part of. He wanted to buy the whole thing. Then the price went up, and then there was, about 6 different bids we've seen over the past 2 years. So now there's talk that it might be 25% he'll own, but you know what? I wouldn't hang my hat on it because it's just taking for ages. Wilfried Zaha, Tanguy and Ndombele, who play for Spurs as well, both playing for Galatasaray. So you never know what Manchester United's going to turn up, do you?
Zaha used to play for United as well.
He did as well. So it's a homecoming for him, but of course he's been there plenty of times with Crystal Palace. Luton Burnley tonight as well in the Premier League. I do want to mention the Ryder Cup, though.
Why?
Because there's a lot of talk now about Luke Donald and what a brilliant captain he's been. Because he's really galvanised the squad. They want him to be the captain again. It's at a place called Bethpage. You think it was actually a person, but Bethpage in New York is where 2025 Ryder Cup's going to take place. He only got the job because of Henrik Stenson going to Live Golf, and we've had Rory, who's been saying all these Live golfers not going to be involved again. But the way he did it, not only was he very serious about the build-up, there was a lot of fun as well, pyjama parties, and what he was doing was when the golfers would go back, I mean, this is a lovely touch, is that he would leave a note on the beds with a little dad joke on.
Stenson would?
No, this is what Luke Donald was doing.
Oh, Luke Donald?
Luke Donald as captain.
He left.
Little joke, I've got one.
Have you?
Yeah, would you like to hear it?
Right.
OK. Isabel, I think you'll like this. This is a bad dad joke from Luke Donald, and this went, I think, to Shane Lowry. And it goes like this. And it says, if you're an American in the living room, what are you in the bathroom? So if you're an American in the living room, what are you in the bathroom?
An American.
European. European in the bathroom. It took me ages to get it. If you go into the bath, European.
You're not European. European.
European. What are you doing in the bathroom?
Peeing. European sounds like European.
Thanks, Izzy.
Or if you're in the bathroom.
European, not European.
Boom.
What do you think? Do you like that one?
The first time I ever heard the word bathroom, meaning toilet.
Yes.
Right. Was
loo in polite circles.
Yeah, it was the Osmonds came up to me, and it was in Belfast. I was interviewing.
Hold on, the Osmonds came up to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they said to me, "Excuse me, do you have a bathroom we could use?"
And you're like, "What, a
shower? Would you like a bath?"
I said, "There's only a toilet."
Yeah.
But of course, that's the American word.
Because if you go to America and you say, "Could you show me where the toilet?" A toilet is a receptacle. It's not a room. So that's where things start getting... Hey, can you tell me where's the bathroom? I want to use the bathroom.
What do you mean by a...
Well, a toilet is not... I mean, if you say, where's the toilet, you would just be saying, where is the actual thing? The toilet, the actual receptacle.
Receptacle.
Yes. Yeah. I've never used the word receptacle, and now I've used it twice.
I got a urinal once for my bathroom. I've got it built into my house.
You've got a built-in urinal?
Yeah, it was a very bad
Is it a long trough one or just the singular?
No, it was a tall trough one.
Really?
Tall trough,
was it one of those ones with the...
We did have a lot of sons at one stage.
Yeah, but it was a really bad idea because you've got to keep water running through it to get smells done.
Do you put the little thing in there? The little thing, the little soapy thing in there?
Yeah, but I wouldn't recommend it.
I've never seen one of those in a house ever.
Well, I was that man.
You were.
There we come.
Innovative.
Finally, special tribute to Franny Lee.
Franny Lee, may rest in peace.
Man that invented the toilet roll, as far as we're concerned, but a fantastic footballer passed away yesterday.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Right, stay with us. Excuse me, I'm going to have to cough. You may have to read this, sorry.
You're supposed to go, Arsenal. That was the way.
I can't read this.
Derek Morecambe used to do it.
I'm trying to cough. Hurry up.
Hope we're not making you embarrassed. Well,
sorry, can I? I'm really sorry. Can I?
Slap her
There you
back
go.
with
There you go.
that.
How's that? Okay.
Thank you.
The Education Secretary is planning to ban mobile phones in schools to combat disruption. And about blooming time, we say, have another cough there, puke up. Lovely. Next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel. Quarter to 8 is the time. The news you're waking up to on this Tuesday morning. The second part of the public inquiry into the coronavirus response in Britain starts later, focusing on core decision-making and political governance. Rishi Sunak has failed to hand over his WhatsApp messages from his time as Chancellor to the inquiry, despite the High Court ruling that ministers should disclose their communications.
And a civil fraud case against the former US President Donald Trump has begun in New York. Trump's accused of inflating the value of his assets by billions of dollars to secure better loan and insurance terms. It's one of a number of legal battles the former president's facing, while remaining a frontrunner in the polls to be the Republican presidential candidate. Speaking outside the courtroom, Mr. Trump claimed he's a victim of the single biggest witch hunt of all time.
A second police force is investigating allegations against Russell Brand. In a statement, Thames Valley confirmed it has received new information relating to harassment and stalking dating back to 2018. They added that officers are currently reviewing the information available. Russell Brand denies the allegations.
And we are going through the papers this morning in the company of the political consultant for HuffPost Online, Kevin Schofield. And joining us in the studio, sorry, I don't know where we're going with the autocue, I'm going to read it off here, Derek Lord, author and businessman. Welcome to both of you. Kevin, thank you very much for joining us. And I want to start with you. Eamonn and I were discussing this in Makeup, actually, the story about sewage this morning. It's in the Mail, page 12. And anger, as we're seeing water bills rise, and we're effectively being asked to pay as customers for this sewage disgrace.
And reservoirs that they all should have been digging as well, and all sorts of things, Kevin. What do these companies do besides just taking profits?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, you can understand why bill payers are absolutely furious this morning. You know, that people are unhappy with the service that they're getting right now. And now they're being told they're going to have to pay around about £156 a year extra, as you say, on their bills, but also to clear up the mess, effectively, that the water companies have created in terms of sewage pumped into rivers, into water, not building enough capacity. Meanwhile, water bosses are taking out huge salaries and huge bonuses. So you can absolutely understand why the idea that they're going to start whacking bills up by £156 a year is causing quite a lot of anger.
Them actually have to refund customers over the next year or so through not providing proper services.
Well, it would be nice to think so, but as you can imagine, they're pretty reluctant to be doing that. It's all really take, isn't it? And in terms of the bills, they only seem to be heading in one direction, and it comes on top of all the other aspects of the cost of living crisis. Winter just around the corner, we'll be looking at higher energy bills as well. So yeah, people are understandably, I think, pretty frustrated.
From water companies and sewage to other gutter matters, people at home may make that link. The Guardian front page reflecting on Trump and his latest court case. Derek.
Indeed, and this is a very interesting story on multiple levels, because I think the bigger question is whether or not in public life truth matters. I think we decided here in the United Kingdom not so long ago that it does, which is why Boris Johnson had to resign. Does it matter in the United States of America? But the other thing that I think is very interesting about this story is that it's being dealt with as a civil offence in the United States of America. I think it's very likely if that was in the United Kingdom, this case, it would be a criminal matter, because the way in which...
So he can't go to jail for this?
He cannot go to jail for it. But also, which is strange to me too, he doesn't even have to appear during the court case itself. Evidence and the arguments can be heard without him there. And then any kind of findings only apply to New York, nowhere else in the United States of America. It is a most peculiar judicial system.
What about phones in schools, Kevin? The Times are reporting this on page 7. Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, she's going to make an announcement about this.
Yeah, so there's a bit of déjà vu about this story. I seem to remember Gavin Williamson, when he was Education Secretary, saying exactly the same thing. It's a bit of a hardy perennial story. Gillian Keegan, here at the Conservative Conference is going to announce that she's going to ban mobile phones from schools. The devil, though, is in the detail. This is just guidance that she's going to be issuing. So schools, if they want, can actually ignore it. Although I feel that most schools probably do already ban kids from taking mobile phones into class, because obviously it's hugely disruptive to the teacher. Now, what Michelle Keegan is saying, that if schools do ignore this guidance, then she will look to introduce legislation which would then put it on a statutory footing. But again, that's a very lengthy process, and we're less than a year out probably from a general election, so there probably wouldn't be time even to get it on the statute book. So it feels like an announcement that's been made because they're desperate to get a news line for the Tory party conference, rather than it being any major innovative policy.
Yeah, I think you mean Gillian Keegan. It's an easy mistake to make. I think you said Michelle Keegan there. It doesn't matter. Kevin, can we talk, in fact, Derek, let's go to you on this one. And this is Idris Elba admitting yesterday something which I think is quite interesting, and I think it's something that we don't possibly talk about in society much, and that's workaholics. I've got a few of those in my family. And he says he's been getting therapy for that. Tell us more.
Yes, there's a wonderful, dashing photograph of Idris Elba. I don't suspect that he takes a bad photograph. And he is talking about the fact that he's been in therapy now for over a year because he is a workaholic. He's not alone, in fact. I think it's 4 in 10 people in the United Kingdom claims to be a workaholic. But the thing that's interesting to me about this story is that 32.7% of people that claim to be workaholics have also been diagnosed with ADHD. So there's a very bigger problem
and connection
rather than just being workaholics.
Yeah, very, very interesting, this. He's just finished a series on Netflix called Hijack, which was very, very good, it has to be said. But
well, we get to benefit from his overworking, presumably.
We do, but a lot of actors would be like that. There are a lot. Look at Tom Cruise.
Well, I do think acting probably is kind of cut out to create workaholics, because you neglect your personal life. You're not in the same place all the time. You don't have the kind of routines.
You
then
fall
when
off the conveyor belt.
You don't have any of that to fall back on. And as you say, then you become yesterday's news. So you have to keep going.
Yeah, you see, Derek, we're all defined by what we do. So, you know, whether you... We are defined by what we do.
Yes.
No, excuse me. Let me listen to me on this.
I mean...
Right, so if you are Isabel, the taxi driver, you go into the pub or whatever, that's Isabel, she's the taxi driver. That's Isabel, she's the chief executive, whatever it happens to be. So we are defined by what we do, and when you don't do anything, then you just become a non-person. So we have to hold on to an identity as to what we do.
I think you might be a workaholic by all accounts.
I think that you are right. We are defined by what we do. And the one thing that is really important, I think, to understand now is that wherever you are in the world, your work follows you. That didn't always used to be the case. So people are constantly on their emails, people are constantly on their mobile phones, people are constantly doing Zoom, Teams, and so on and so forth. And I think that this is one of the reasons why the number of people that actually claim to be workaholics is actually on the rise.
Kevin, I just want to bring Kevin into this debate because, you know, in our industry, but I think particularly amongst political journalists, there's a lot of workaholics, aren't there? Some people who just don't have an off switch. It's just this treadmill. And actually, if you look back at the news agenda, the political agenda of the last, pretty much since the referendum, it has been relentless, hasn't it?
Yeah, I've probably put my hands up and say I'm pretty guilty of it myself, much to my family's annoyance at times. But yeah, you just can't switch off because you're right, politics is pretty crazy right now and has been for several years. And there is no off switch. It just keeps coming. And I'm speaking to you from the Conservative Party conference. You know, it's just a 24-hour job these days. You're constantly on a deadline, you're looking at social media, you're just keeping your eye on stories just coming left, right and centre, and it is difficult at times to try and sort of switch off, really. But you have to try, especially for your family's sake as much as anything, for your own mental health, really. But it is very, very difficult.
Quick word, 30 seconds, Derek, on a job. Someone who has claimed the job of Lady Chief Justice, Dame Sue Carr, the First Lady Chief Justice.
This is a very important development. Since the 13th century, we've had Lord Chief Justices. Today, we have our first ever Lady Chief Justice, and it's a great day to celebrate the advancement of women in every area of society. And the one other thing I would say about this, which is why it's important to me, is that this is a biological woman, because we're going to actually reach the stage in this country one day when the people that get these appointments may not necessarily have been born biologically.
Interesting debate. Thank you both very much indeed for all of that, Kevin and Derek. The guys will be back in about 40 minutes' time.
And we'll have lots more for you coming up at 8 o'clock from the Conservative Party conference in Manchester. Don't go anywhere. Thank you.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
8 o'clock is the time, right on the button. It's Tuesday the 3rd of October. Thank you for watching Breakfast on GB News. I'm Eamonn, this is Isabel.
And here's what's leading our programme this morning. Trans women are to be banned from female hospital wards. It's one of the proposals to be announced by the Health Secretary later in an aim to bring back, as he puts it, common sense to the health service.
Also at the conference, the future of HS2. it remains the divisive subject. There are reports that the Prime Minister will announce in his keynote speech that the final leg to Manchester will be axed, but Rishi Sunak and loyal Conservative MPs remain tight-lipped once again today, which is becoming very irritating.
So that, I'm not sure that decision has been made. That decision hasn't been made. You asked about embarrassment. What I'm not embarrassed about is this Prime Minister does the right thing on the basis of the evidence, coolly, calmly, unemotionally.
But with backbench MPs, the Tory Mayor of the West Midlands condemning the move, could there be a Tory civil war brewing? Our Deputy Political Editor Tom Harwood can answer that.
It's never an easy ride for a Prime Minister who's behind in the polls, but this Prime Minister appears to believe there might be more electoral mileage in backing drivers and buses than expensive high-speed trains. Clearly, this will be a contentious issue, and it's been hanging over this conference for the last 3 days. Might it be brought to a head tomorrow? We'll find out.
And if you're a James Bond fan, you could grab yourself a piece of film history, as items belonging to Sir Roger Moore go up for auction tomorrow. But at what price? Do you need deep pockets? We'll let you know in just a bit with an exclusive preview.
And Alex Deakin will have your latest weather forecast.
Bit of a wet start in places this morning, but most of us will have a bright and breezy day. There'll be some sunshine. There will also be a fair few showers. Join me later for a full forecast.
And as always, Paul Coit is here with all the latest from the world of sport.
There's a collective sigh of relief on the King's Road today as Chelsea win a game of football. Wonderful news for them. And also I've got an interesting story, the snooker player in non-regulation trousers.
What? There's such a thing as regulation pants.
Trousers. Oh, yeah. Yeah, turn up in the wrong trousers.
Do you have to wear a waistcoat, or is that just,
You know what? That's very interesting. I think you do have to wear a waistcoat. Back in the old days, you could wear a normal tie, especially a lounge suit, whereas now it's got to be bow tie, wrong trousers, trouble.
Do you know that stretch you've got to do with one leg on the floor on the snooker table, and then you...
1 foot, always 1 foot on the floor at all times, yeah.
And then you can bend the other leg up onto the table.
Yes.
I did that once.
Oh.
Did you once?
Should we have photographic
evidence?
Trousers. Oh, did you?
Did you know this? Did you know there's also a law against split trousers as well as regulation trousers?
Okay.
Were you Dr. Frame for that?
If there isn't, there should be.
Look forward to talking about that later. Have you ever split your trousers over a snooker table? Let us know. GBViews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GBNews. Well, is a Conservative civil war brewing? More reports of the imminent axing of HS2 northwards. There are reports that the Prime Minister will confirm this tomorrow. He says it's in a bid to save the taxpayer billions of pounds in rising costs and instead invest some of that in local infrastructure in the north of England.
Well, let's get some analysis on all of this from our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. Listen, Tom, despite all of these reports and all of the noise and almost overshadowing the Chancellor's speech yesterday, the Prime Minister saying he will not be put under pressure to make this announcement. But let's be honest, he is under huge pressure. I mean, one suspects he didn't want to mention it in his speech at all tomorrow, that he wanted it in the autumn statement. And here he is talking this morning saying, I'm not just going to announce it to please TV editors.
It is interesting. It seems the government might have lost control of the narrative on this issue and have done for some time. But on the other hand, clearly, what we have been seeing over the last days and indeed weeks now is some pitch rolling on this issue. Clearly, the number 10 and indeed the Prime Minister didn't think that this was something that could be announced out of the blue. And instead, we've seen allies of the Prime Minister, everyone from transport ministers to William Hague, who, of course, was the mentor of the Prime Minister, his predecessor in the seat of Richmond, Yorkshire, coming out saying, hang on, this project is a bit of a white elephant, it's getting very expensive. It originally was going to cost 32 billion, now it's costing more north of 100 billion pounds. And we've seen this very clear and precise pitch rolling over the past few days, with ministers across the Conservative Party asking whether or not this is value for money. That gives some political leeway then for the Prime Minister to say, I've looked at this, I've looked at sort of the crossed I's and or crossed T's and dotted I's, I should say, and come to the conclusion that this does not make financial sense. This does not add value for money. That's probably going to be what the Prime Minister says tomorrow, but in all likelihood, he's already made this decision. Yet ministers continue with this fiction that he's still poring over the fine details of this decision in between the fringe events and shaking hands and all the rest of it that goes on at Conservative Party conference. But we have heard ministers continually make this argument and avoid the question, just as Michael Gove told to Camilla Tominey on her Sunday morning programme on GBNews.
I agree that we've been too London-centric in the past, and that's why we have a long-term plan for levelling up with lots of different
So you
ingredients
must think
in
that
it.
HS2 should go to Manchester then?
Well, I think levelling up involves doing many more things
Give us
than
your
just
position on
transport
that. Should it go to
infrastructure.
Manchester?
Well, I think we need to make sure that we're getting absolute value for money
Mr. Gove,
from it.
come on, you must
But
be
you-
able
but
to have an opinion on whether it should go to Manchester or not.
I absolutely think the most important thing is making sure that when we level up, we take into account all of the things that we need to do. So we've shifted Arts Council
I know,
funding.
but should it go
We've
to
shifted
Manchester,
research
yes
and
or no?
development funding. Well, we're going to have to.
Should it? Not will
we're
it?
going to
Should
have
it?
to look at every conceivable pound that we spend on transport in order to make sure that we
I know,
get
but
value
it's
for
still
money
not
from
an
it.
answer to the question whether you think it should
my
go
answer
to
to the
Manchester.
question.
All right.
And there we have it, the value for money argument again. I spoke to the Rail and Transport Minister, Rick Holden, yesterday, who was saying that they need to kick the tracks all the way along to make sure that it's all value for money. This has clearly been the theme of the conversation, and perhaps it's going to be easier for the Prime Minister to make this announcement after all of this paraphernalia beforehand than it would have been out of the blue.
I'll tell you what, Tom, there must be some spin doctors absolutely tearing their hair out. First of all, at the weekend, it felt like a rerun of the leaders' debate with hopefuls wanting to take Rishi Sunak's job at some point in the future. Then we had an internal row about whether there should be tax cuts. Then we've had this HS2 debacle. And then we've had Liz Truss attracting more attention than any of the keynote speeches yesterday. So no wonder they've gone for some red meat in the Health Secretary's speech today, front of the Telegraph, something that pretty much all Conservatives will agree on, transgender women to be banned from female wards.
Red meat was an unfortunate phrase.
Oh, sorry.
I thought there,
to make that link.
Yeah, we know what you mean.
Over to you, Tom, quickly.
Speaking of red meat, the Energy Secretary, Claire Coutinho, was talking about meat bans in her speech yesterday. That was a lot of red meat for the party faithful here in Manchester. Lots of question marks over who exactly was proposing this meat ban. She seemed to suggest that it was the Labour Party, although in reality I think you can find some suggestions of meat restricting measures in the carbon budget processing that of course the Prime Minister referred to in his net zero announcement not so long ago. But I suppose all of these things do feed into a narrative here in Manchester, that there is being that a pivot is taking place perhaps from a Prime Minister who was Mr. Stable, Mr. Steady the tracks and calm everything down, to someone who is changing himself into more of a change candidate, trying to find these wedge issues between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. Rishi Sunak does not want people like me and people across the media to continue to say that there is no difference between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. And clearly on these issues, whether it's the environment, whether it's the issue of meat or rail infrastructure, or indeed transgender issues now, there is clearly some
Could we have some more GB views in,
made there
please?
by the Prime Minister and indeed his cabinet.
Can I just ask you, speaking of you, and I know you burn the midnight oil and you attend all of these fringe events, and lots of journalism happens at these parties as well. What is the mood at conference this year? I mean, the Prime Minister's busy trying to tell us it's buoyant, everybody's, optimistic about next year. The media, on the other hand, is saying there's huge rows, it's infighting, everyone's jostling for position. Which is it?
I think it's a bit of both. Clearly, this is not the same funereal atmosphere that there was last year at the Conservative Party's conference in Birmingham. Remember, at that time, the Prime Minister had made a humiliating U-turn on day 2 of the conference, and indeed the Tories had been plunging in the polls. There are people who you can speak to here in Manchester who see this narrow path to victory. That's the phrase that so many around the Prime Minister will use. The sort of the path is set there, but also at the same time, this is clearly a beauty parade of those who might want to take on the leadership of the Conservative Party after the next election, should the party lose power. And clearly that has been a big theme. We mentioned earlier, of course, Liz Truss's growth rally. 200 people turned away from that rally on the fringes of this conference. More people turning up to see that, of course, hosted by our very own Liam Halligan. More people turned up to see that than any cabinet minister's speech so far. And similarly, there has been some sort of joyful senses, not least at the GBNews party last night, where Priti Patel, Liz Truss and Nigel Farage were all dancing the night away on the dance floor.
And were you there, Tom? To witness
I
it all?
certainly was. I'm running on about 3 hours sleep.
Oh, well, we wouldn't expect anything less. Thanks very much indeed.
Well, the Home Secretary today is set to make her speech at conference as one of the key figures, one of the big beasts in the Tory party. Policing numbers, crime rates, untackled law breaking set to be top of the concerns. Pip Thompson with more.
Home Secretary Suella Braverman will speak at the Conservative Party conference later as the government tries to get to grips with some of the issues affecting the country. It comes as record numbers of police officers quit the force and knife crime continues to rise. In the year to March, 4,668 officers left after a voluntary resignation, against a backdrop of 48,204 knife crime offences. That's a 5% increase on March last year. Immigration is another challenge the government hopes to tackle, as GBNews data reveals that more than 25,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year. Something else on the Home Secretary's agenda is the rather contentious Rwanda plan, set for a battle at the Supreme Court next week. Speaking in Washington, D.C., Suella Braverman argued that the 1951 Refugee Convention is too loose and hinted that the government could leave the ECHR.
Any attempt to reform the Refugee Convention will see you smeared as anti-refugee. Similar epithets are hurled at anyone who suggests reform of the ECHR or its court in Strasbourg. I reject the notion that a country cannot be expected to respect human rights if it is not signed up to an international human rights organisation.
The Home Secretary is expected to use her speech in Manchester to boost her popularity ratings among the more right-wing arm of the party. Ahead of a general election, many backbenchers fear they could lose. So, are we looking at a future Tory leader? One wouldn't bet against it. Pip Thompson, GB News.
Well, that's what the Home Secretary will be talking about. Here's the director of what is called the Sanctuary Foundation, Dr. Krish Kandaya. And Krish, yours is a charity that supports refugees and welcomes them into the country. Your job must be made more difficult with pronouncements, as we're going to hear today from the Home Secretary.
Definitely it will be. I was speaking at a seminar yesterday around refugee education, and we were hearing how children watching the news who have, these are kids that have come from Ukraine, are watching the news and feeling that they're not welcome in this country, that they're not wanted here. They're the kids that we opened our doors to, opened our homes to, but the news keeps telling them they're not welcome here, and it's the Home Secretary that's making that announcement to them each day.
Yeah, well, what would you say today? I mean, I can imagine this as a reality. There'll be people listening on radio and watching on TV today who will not welcome me interviewing you. It's almost as if, you know, people like you should disappear, not be there, that you would be an encouragement almost for people coming into the country. What would you say to those people?
Well, an unprecedented number of people in Britain open their homes to help Ukrainians. We are able to show hospitality to people that need it. I'm a foster parent. I lock my door every night because I must make sure the kids in my care are kept safe. But if there's a need for a child to have safe sanctuary, my door gets opened and the child comes in. I believe we're a nation full of compassion. And when we meet people like the Ukrainians who need our help, they can find safety and comfort in our homes.
How much of this is about the Home Secretary pushing or framing herself as a future Conservative Party leader?
I think it's a lot about that. This week she talked about 780 million people that might be coming to the UK. That was a fabricated number. She added up all the populations of every nation that had any issue with women's rights. That included Afghanistan. Now, we know in the world, most displaced people stay very close to the countries where they were born in. So, for example, Syrians mostly moved to Jordan. They didn't come to the UK. So there is no way that 780 million people are coming to Britain. It was a fabricated number to generate outrage and to bolster her bid to be party leader, I believe.
Yeah. When you get down to all of this, I mean, this is a speech obviously for the membership. What do you think amongst general society, the general populace, things about, you know, pulling out of the European Court of Human Rights, for instance? Do you think there's an appetite for that?
I think it's probably 50-50. I think some people have been listening to the rhetoric from the Home Secretary, that fear-mongering, and they're worried. They're blaming immigrants for the fact that they can't get a GP appointment or they're struggling to get housing. Actually, the reverse is true. Immigration is the reason we have a functioning NHS right now. But other people think, you know what, my human rights are too important to be trashed over a political debate, that actually we need someone to hold our government to account. The Human Rights Act was put into place after the Second World War, when the Nazis were killing Jewish people, and it gave rise to things like the Nuremberg trials, where a country could be held to account for how it treated its citizens. I think coming out of something like that is a huge overreaction to what is indeed actually a small problem. 40,000 people coming to the UK on a small boat. That is too many people coming on a small boat, but in the grand scheme of things, it's only 6% of net migration.
Doctor, there will, just as a final point, you know, a lot of people will think one person coming into the country is too much, and it's obviously not a popular manoeuvre. The government see that it's a vote winner if they can get the boats down, which they haven't been able to do so far. But your foundation, it's got a beautiful word attached to it. That beautiful word is sanctuary. I think sanctuary is a marvellous word. What does it in effect mean for those people who you look after or try to look after or welcome initially to these shores?
I remember opening our home for a party for November the 5th, bonfire night, and we invited some Ukrainian families to come round, and we'd warned them there would be some loud noises. And yet when the children came, as soon as they heard any explosion, any noise from the fireworks, they hid under the tables. They were absolutely terrified by what was going on because of the bombs that had dropped on Kyiv. They were absolutely shattered. But now these children are integrated in our schools. They're flourishing. They've got friends. My daughter was playing with a little Ukrainian girl the other day, and she was twirling around. I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "We're playing sisters." Sanctuary gives people the opportunity to rebuild their lives, rebuild friendships, to find love and compassion, and to have a new life again. And it's wonderful. I've seen so many people make that possible. People that have never worked with refugees before, opening their hearts and homes. It's an incredible privilege.
Dr. Krish Kadaya, privileged to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. I just want to ask people listening and watching, what do you think of what the doctor does? Should he be doing it? Should he be encouraged to do it? Is there a need for him? Whether you agree with migration or illegal immigration or not, should there be people like Dr. Krish Kadaya there, or do you think shouldn't be encouraged? Here's Alex Deakin.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a soggy start for parts of East Anglia and the southeast. Generally a bright and breezy kind of day with a few showers around. But as I said, a pretty wet start for parts of East Anglia, the southeast. A lot of spray and surface water on the roads, but that is all clearing away. Then we'll see some sunshine coming through. Plenty of showers coming into western Scotland, still quite breezy here. And we'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers for northern England, North Wales and Northern Ireland. But much of the south and east will stay dry and bright with some sunshine temperatures getting into the mid to high teens. A fresher feel for most compared to yesterday. Still quite windy across northern Scotland especially. Breezy elsewhere. That breeze leads down overnight, so we'll see a few showers drifting in, but many places will stay clear, particularly across the south and the east. Later on though, some more wet and windy weather will come in across the Highlands and the Western Isles. Temperatures will drop down into single figures in rural spots, so a fresh start to Wednesday for most. A bright start though tomorrow morning across much of the Midlands and eastern England. Quite a lot of cloud further north and west, and that rain could cause some problems. It continues to feed into western Scotland. That rain really building up as we go through the day and starting to edge further south, so perhaps arriving across parts of the central belt into Northern Ireland. For England and Wales, just a few scattered showers, mostly in the west. Many central and eastern parts will be dry and bright, and temperatures again in the mid to high teens.
Still to come, we've got a licence to thrill for you this morning.
And every morning, some could say. We have an exclusive look at James Bond memorabilia with Sir Roger Moore's private collection. It's for your eyes only. That's next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Thanks for your company this morning. We are talking all things Bond now. Bond fans are gearing up to see if they can own a slice of 007 film history. Items belonging to
Sir Roger Moore. And these can be everyday items. These can be pens belonging to him, writing sets, a knitwear catalogue.
A what, sorry?
A knitwear catalogue. He used to be a knitwear model. So we did. So the knitting patterns that people would get, and then you could knit the Roger Moore jumper.
People are weird. Anyway, it's going up for auction on the 4th of October in London. The Deputy Chairman of the Auctioneers, Bonhams, has given us a little look at some of those items going under the hammer.
So this year it marks the 50th anniversary of Sir Roger playing James Bond for the very first time in Live and Let Die. And he died, sadly, 5 years ago, and his family felt this was the right time to give his fans the world over a chance to bid on some of these lots. Well, there are so many unique items in this sale, and from James Bond interest, I think for me, this coat behind me, which is a Chesterfield coat that he wore in his first film, Live and Let Die. And in fact, in the very first scene, you see him coming out of JFK Airport wearing the coat, and he gets in a taxi on his way to see the villain of the film, Mr. Big. Well, one of the most important lots in the sale is this James Bond Omega Seamaster watch, which is a limited edition number, but it's actually unique because it was given to Sir Roger on the 50th anniversary of the franchise by Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson. And they are, of course, the producers of the Bond franchise. And engraved on the back of the strap, it actually says, "To Roger, with love from Barbara and Michael." Well, I think everyone knows that Sir Roger Moore was a very keen skier, and he's involved in 2 of the great ski chases in Bond history. This ski suit, I think, is just so iconic. It comes from his last film, The View to a Kill, and it's the opening sequence when he comes down the slope and he's chased by a bunch of guys with, on skis with guns, and he skis, then he snowboards, and then he ends up in a submarine at the end of it. The cabinet behind me has some really fun things from his 40th anniversary Swatch watch collection in this wonderful 007 case. We've got his wallet with his bank cards in it, and a couple of backgammon sets as well. One of which, the one beneath here in the red leather case, he would play on set with Cubby Broccoli, I understand for high stakes, and they would sort of settle up at the end of the series, and if Cubby was winning, he wouldn't let Roger go back on set until they'd finished the game. So it's some great stories behind that, and some great games played on the board, I imagine. Well, Sir Roger Moore played James Bond more than any other actor, 7 times between 1973 and 1985. And in my opinion, he's the best dressed of all the Bonds. And here we have one of the most iconic dinner suits that he wore. And this from The View to a Kill. He wore it in that amazing scene at the Eiffel Tower where he's chasing after Mayday, played by Grace Jones. And they go up and then down the Eiffel Tower. He's standing on a lift shaft going up and down. So the estimate on the suit is £20,000 to £30,000. And again, we'll see where this ends up on the day. But we're really, really excited about this sale. There has been unparalleled interest and excitement the world over. It's been on tour in the States and also in France. And it's a very accessible sale because we've got lots at about £100 for a Corgi Tory car, up to the big lots like his personal Omega Seamaster watch at £20,000 to £30,000, and of course his wonderful James Bond suits as well.
Oh, it's the James Bond suits for me every time.
What would you do with them? Just put them on a mannequin?
No, I wouldn't bid, but when I see those, I go a bit weak at the knee and I think, oh, so Bondy.
Classic.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you
Paul
wear...
and I were going, we were going to it last night, but then tiredness got the better of us about 1 o'clock, didn't it?
I know, isn't that terrible?
Yeah.
I'm so looking forward to that. We've still got a day because tomorrow is the actual auction. And if you think of, I love it when we heard it just said there that there are things which are different prices. So, I mean, if you've got millions, you could obviously afford whatever you wanted to. But the backgammon set, for example, they're auctioning everything. It's like everything he owns. So the Roger Moore's own personal travel backgammon set, I think, is estimated between 100 and 150 quid, which is it's worth a punt,
all these things are relative as well. I see that there's another auction going up, the mask, the C-3PO mask in the first Star Wars film. It's on offer for £1 million.
£1 million? See, I went to, about 20 years ago, I went to an Elvis auction, which was also at Bonhams, and I bought a poster. I bought a poster of Roustabout, which was signed by Elvis. But I didn't even know what it was because they brought it out because they're all going for far too much. And they held this thing out and said, look, it's too delicate. We can't open it up. So it all opened up. It was like about 12 feet tall with a little Elvis signature in there.
Gosh.
So I think the frame ended up costing more than the actual poster because it was so huge. But you know, I think if we bought the Roger Moore suits, would we then look like Roger Moore? Well, what do you think? Is he?
He signed.
Do you think so?
He signed it. Well, no, I don't think we would look like him. No, but you see that overcoat, that Crombie coat that he wore in that die. I mean, that is class.
I do think a well-cut suit can make any man look like a spy.
No.
But what we mustn't forget is when he's saying about...
Give short legs and a big belly and whatever.
Those suits and saying, oh, I think he's the best-dressed Bond. Let's not forget, he was wearing suits in the middle of the 70s. We're talking a big flared trouser.
Yeah.
There is a lot of material in that suit.
Yes.
Just the trousers alone.
Some could say.
You could make another suit out of those trousers.
Right, let's bring in another 007 expert, host of the Real 007 podcast, Tom Pickup. Good morning to you. Will you be bidding on any of these items? What tickles your fancy?
Well, I like some of the things in your piece. I think particularly that white ski. I remember watching that as a kid when I was growing up. I want to be Bond because I've seen Roger looking so cool in this ski suit, and he's even got the shades on. And then he does a bit of snowboarding, a bit of skiing, and anything like that. But you're absolutely right. Roger in the 70s made everything look cool. Looking back at some of the films, you know, they have dated a bit, but you couldn't argue with Roger's. The way he does it, like a casual safari suit in The Man with the Golden Gun. No one else could pull it off like Roger.
I love a casual safari suit. Bring back the casual safari suits.
But you were right there, Tom. I was watching For Your Eyes Only a few weeks back, and they haven't dated well some of the humour and the format off them, and you could tell that things just aren't. They're not up to date. Let's put it that way for modern times.
Yeah, some of the things obviously going to date. Bond has always been set in a contemporary setting. You know, when it first came out, it was the swinging 60s. Then he had to change in the 70s. To be honest, the 80s is my generation of when I grew up. So I look back with those probably with real fondness, and I tend to ignore those things. But every time there's a new Bond out, we just get excited, and he has to have the latest things. He has to have the latest suits. He has to have the latest watch, you know, be it by different makes, and there's all the product placement that goes with it. I just think Roger is effortlessly cool throughout his whole life. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to see this auction because it's a bit too far away from me. Loads of my friends have seen it, and they're just bowled away by being able to see such personal items and things that they saw Roger wear in the favourite films of all time.
Yeah, I spent a day with them once and got a lot of pictures taken, and then I went on holiday to London with my kids, and I had my camera bag stolen. And all the photographs undeveloped.
No.
That's so bad.
So bad.
You have your memories, Eamonn.
You have memories. But he did sign a movie poster for me, For Your Eyes Only, and I have that.
Oh well, I'm very jealous. That is one of my favourite Bond films.
Yeah,
that's
you
amazing.
said to me this morning, what can I sell? When we were talking about auctions. Hello?
I didn't say I wanted to sell it.
I know, but, you know, it sounds
I got
like
some
you've got some
bad news for you. I got some bad news for you about that, because film posters are actually artwork. And amazingly, if you get it signed by the actor, you're actually defacing it. You're right. Yeah. So it's actually worth less if the star of the film personally signs it.
Worthless, you're saying.
Okay.
Cash in now.
Tom Pickup, thanks very much indeed. He is the host of the Really 007 podcast and giving us his thoughts there. And Paul, of course, our very own smooth talker.
Yeah.
I
mean, there he
Penny,
was. There, you could have had a starring role as a villain in one of them.
Do you
But
think
it would
so?
be for our eyes only.
No, do you know the little...
Stroking my...
Do you know in The Man with the Golden Gun, the little midget that was there for...
Who on earth do
Christopher
you think
Lee.
could possibly play that then? What are you saying there, Eamonn? Do you want to follow through with
You'd
this?
be good at that. I could be Roger Moore or Christopher Lee. You could be the little midget man.
What am I?
What's her
Don't be
name?
sexist.
No, what was her name? Who was that one?
You're thinking Money Penny, aren't you?
No, yes. What's her name?
Come on.
Pussy Galore.
No. But anyway, the woman in Man with the Golden Gun. Lulu sang the song.
Lulu sang the Man with the Golden Gun.
I'll Google that.
Oh, I look forward to being...
I know it. It's just my dementia got in the way for that one.
I look forward to being the little 3-foot person in there.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
You know, you'd be perfect for it. They get a little uniform for you. You had a little butler's uniform and everything.
Really?
Yeah.
Britt Eklund.
Britt Eklund, yeah.
That's not bad.
So, what have you got sports-wise?
Let's talk about Chelsea. Chelsea won yesterday.
It was a good win. I mean, to be away at Fulham, get the points.
It's just a matter of time before the whole thing's going to come together. Mudryk scores 24 games he's played for Chelsea. Finally, I hate to use a phrase like he opened his account, but that's what he did yesterday. Came off after a short space of time, but they came through. Francis Lee, we should mention. Franny Lee passed away yesterday. Manchester City legend and 60s and 70s
and a Derby County legend too.
Yeah, he was a couple of years at Derby County.
He played at Bolton, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
The thing is, I mean, you look at his goal-scoring record, certainly won every other game in national and international matches.
330 for Manchester City, 148 goals. Not bad.
You wouldn't mess about with him.
You would. Well, we talked about that, didn't we? There's those great moments, and still when you look back, and it's all over YouTube.
You've never seen a fight like it. Google Francis Lee, Norman Hunter, and you will see it's like a heavyweight boxing match.
Leeds against Derby County, and there were literally haymakers where the arms swinging around,
kicking,
the good old happy days of football that we love. And also one of the great goals as well, with the great commentary from Barry Davis saying, look at his face, just look at his face. And a big smile on his face. And but a businessman as well. And then he went on to be chairman of Manchester City. And so anyway, passed away yesterday. A fantastic player. I do want to mention one more thing, and this is that I said earlier, as far as the snooker's concerned, a very weird thing happened at the English Open.
Regulation trousers.
Regulation trousers.
Right.
Ding Junhai wore the wrong trousers yesterday, playing snooker in the English Open. It was the opening frame against Ma Hailong. He turns up in brown trousers. Have you heard anything?
No, that's like coming to school in your school uniform and it being brown trousers instead of black.
Not even Roger Moore could have pulled off the brown
what
trousers.
happened to him?
Well, he turned up and then he's wearing brown. He should be wearing black. Regulate, because back in the old days you could wear a normal tie like yourself, but they've got rid of all that. It's always formal wear. So he's turned up, thought he could wear brown, matching waistcoat and trousers. No. So then he was said, look, you've got to wear black. He had to go off down Brentwood High Street, go and find a men's outfitters, buy some black trousers, and then he was Dr. Frame because he was late, so he didn't make it in time. But you know,
did he win the tie?
I don't even know whether he did win the tie. I don't even think we got that far. But but more importantly, the fashion is everything.
But that pose that he had there, that can be very dangerous if your trousers are tight.
It can be. And as you say, the 1 foot on the... What would you rather do? Would you rather go, I'll just miss this one, or use the rest?
Oh, you can use the rest, yeah.
Yeah, use the rest and do that, or the spider, instead of getting the leg right across the top. It can cause all sorts of trouble.
Rip.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, my
Pleasure.
friend. OK.
Right, stay with us. Coming up on the programme, which famous star has X, formerly Twitter, signed up to revive its lost fortunes? We'll tell you more. If you're watching TV, there was a bit of a clue there. If you are listening on the radio, you have to wait to find out after this.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People talk today, what's in the news, what's not. Kevin Schofield, political editor of HuffPost, joins us from the Conservative Party conference in Manchester, and in the studio at London, Derek Lord, the author and business person. Right. Kevin, going to begin with you, and this is a warning from economists that the UK is heading for recession. Tell us more. This is in the eye.
Yeah, so up until now, obviously we know that economic growth has been pretty stagnant, but it has been growing. We've managed to defy expectations, really, and avoid a recession. However, economists are now saying, reporting in the Eye this morning, that a recession is coming. Now, that's bad news, obviously, for Rishi Sunak, not least because one of his 5 pledges to voters that he made last January was that he would grow the economy. So were the economy to dip into a recession, then clearly that would be used by his political opponents to criticise him and say, well, look, you're just not keeping your promises to voters. So yeah, it could be a pretty nasty blow for Rishi Sunak, I think, this one.
Just reading the detail, they're saying there's a decision, really. Either we have high rates and a recession, or low rates, which would mean it would not get inflation down towards the government's target level. I suppose the question is always, you know, comparison, really, with where other countries are doing. The government at the moment very much trying to say, well, hang on a minute, everyone's talking down Britain, but we're actually doing better than the French economy, the German economy. Where are they with talk of recessions at the moment?
Well, you're right, and obviously you take economic forecasts with a huge pinch of salt because they're often found to be entirely wrong. So yeah, the government has actually had some good news lately. Previous analysis of economic growth was proved to be quite pessimistic, and it was upgraded. So it means that the economy has been growing more quickly, for instance, than France, than Germany. We recovered out of the pandemic a lot more quickly than had previously been thought. So the government will obviously point to those statistics and say, well, look, let's just hang on a little minute and let's see how it actually pans out, because people have been forecasting a recession for quite some time and it's never actually happened. So as I say, the Prime Minister will be hoping really that the same happens this time, because as I say, because of this promise that he's given to grow the economy. If it goes into recession, then he's failed to meet that promise.
Okay. And also, Kevin, I mean, all economies are always at risk of a recession. You know, there are three things that cause a recession. There's supply side issues, there's the financial crisis or world events. So by definition, all economies in the world are subject to fluctuations and there can be a recession. But the upside in all this was the last quarter, where we did see growth of 0.2%.
OK. Let's talk about X, formerly known as Twitter, something which I think will never catch on. I think it's a stupid name. And they have hired who to promote the brand?
They have, and for our listeners, there is a very beautiful photograph of Paris Hilton on page 7 of the Financial Times. And Twitter's now changed its name to X, but now it seems to me that it's actually fundamentally changing its entire model.
Am I the only one who thinks that looks seedy?
Yes. No.
You have an X,
right. I agree with you.
And you have someone a little bit on the trashy end
yeah.
of the scale, and you think, is this some kind of OnlyFans? What's happened to Twitter?
But what they may also realise, I can't remember who said it, is that nobody's actually lost any money underestimating the public taste.
Well, that's probably true.
Yes,
yeah, that's probably true.
She's a bit yesterday's news, though, isn't she?
Well, she might very well be, but she's in the money yet again, because, I mean, they're going to create an online shopping channel, which she's going to front on the X platform. And this has all become really rather important for X or Twitter, because they've lost about 60% of advertising revenues since Musk became its owner. So there is a crisis that they're actually.
But I think Twitter's one of the only places that you can go where you're shopping free, from my experiences.
Exactly.
So this is all set to change. How do you feel about that, Kevin? I know you're an avid Twitter user, or X user.
Oh yeah, probably a little bit too much, to be perfectly honest with you. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was fine before, to be honest.
Yeah,
I
same.
thought Twitter was absolutely fine before Elon Musk took over. But yeah, you know, he's obviously got to try and claw back the huge amount of money that he invested when he bought the company. It's not gone too well so far. You're saying that obviously they've lost quite a lot of advertising revenue. He's never out the headlines in terms of controversy. He's got to hope that
the thing about Musk is obviously he's very rich, but he's not always very successful. There's lots of things that really crash that he puts his name to, and he gets it wildly wrong as well.
Absolutely, and it appears, looking from the outside, that he spent all this money to buy the company somewhat reluctantly. He was going to buy it, then he wasn't, then he did, without any real idea, I think, of what he was letting himself in for. He paid a huge amount of money for it, and as I say, he's got to try and claw that back somehow. I mean, he's a pretty unique character. He's going about it in a very unusual way. This might work for him, but I think it's a huge gamble.
Can we talk about COVID now? This is in the eye. I know it's a bit of a dirty word, but you know, it seems to be making a comeback. My husband caught it on the way back from our summer holiday in August. He was really ill. First time he'd had it, actually, we think. And he was in bed, the shivers, the whole lot, skin crawling. My daughter's school teacher was off the whole of last week. My friends this weekend, who were due to come and stay, cancelled because they all had COVID. And now the newspaper's saying up to 200,000 people will be tested often to try and track the spread of it this winter, Kevin. And I would say to you, they're a little bit late in all of this. It's been doing the rounds quite a lot the last few months.
It has been, and there's been this new variant which is causing some concern about its ability to evade vaccines. So yeah, it's a bit like during the pandemic when the authorities were trying to keep a track of who's got it in the community. Obviously, we're no longer having to test every day. We're not provided with free tests like we were in the past. So what they're doing is they're choosing like 200,000 people to test themselves regularly, and that will give them an idea of how prevalent the virus is in the community. But you know, we've got to live with it. It's going to be around forever, and it's a question of trying to live with it as best we can.
It hasn't been around forever.
And COVID season.
It's
going to be around forever.
It will be around forever, I think.
Well, I'll tell you who's not around anymore on Strictly, and that is Les Dennis, Derek.
And we're sticking with the eye because I like this story, because I like Les Dennis. Everybody knows he's a comedian, and he's been voted off in the first week of Strictly Come Dancing. And there's a very interesting piece in the Eye, and it says, what's happened to the British public and our love of the underdog? Because we usually liked to be entertained by people on this programme who couldn't dance, you know. That was almost like the point of it.
That was the premise,
But now we've become so serious, and we want everybody to almost be professional, polished dancers in week one. You know, I used to switch on not to look at wonderful dancers, but to look at Anne Widdecombe, you know, doing a lift. It was hysterical, you know. Les going out in the first week, you know, where is the entertainment now, you know, in Strictly?
They've been getting a few bad headlines, haven't they? I think the front of The Sun, is it today, has Shirley Ballas saying she's afraid to leave her home because she's been criticised or trolled for the way she's differentiated her judging for female contestants versus male contestants. I mean, I don't know how closely you follow it, either of you. I'm a big Strictly fan. It's absolute box office appointment to view for me on a Saturday night. I think Shirley's great, and I think people are looking for problems, personally. What do you guys think?
Well, I think
maybe
some
she's
people...
not. I mean, she just simply isn't as popular, is she, as Les, as chief judge? And I think it's been rumoured over some years now that she's had some problems with her previous judges as well, and one or two of them left because of this. I think she's a good judge. She does it very well. I find her fair and balanced and reasonable. But, I mean, that story really is more about the online world in which we live in today and the rise in risks of being well known.
And I have to say this after Ruthie's time on Strictly, but I do genuinely mean it. Anton's my favourite. He just is.
She went to see Anton on Sunday. He's at the London Palladium,
He's got his show out at the minute.
Yeah, she can't beat me. I shared a bedroom with Les Dennis in Torquay. It's a whole other story. It's a very hilarious story. It's another story I remember.
Add that to the list.
Kevin, here's a very interesting thing. Lake Windermere, a lot of toxic algae is appearing in Windermere in the Lake District, and this green, slimy stuff, and the theories as to why it's there, global warming, runoff from fertilisers, from farming fields, pollution, all sorts of things. But the thing is, it's also happening in the biggest freshwater lake in Europe, which is in Northern Ireland, Lough Neagh, and it's really, really bad. So this is not just Windermere. So what's the solution, or what's happening? What can you tell us with this?
Yeah, so the environmentalists have joined forces with the UK Space Agency, and what they're going to do is they're going to use satellite data to analyse effectively the spread of this contamination in the lake from space, and they think by doing that they'll be able to come up with an idea as to why it's happening and what can be done to combat it. I mean, obviously, pollution in waterways has been in the news an awful lot lately, and this is something else, obviously, that's causing quite a lot of concern, and hopefully, thanks to the wonders of modern technology, a solution will be able to be found for it.
What do you think, Derek?
I agree with Kevin entirely. I mean, I think you were spot on in your analysis.
OK, well, let's move on to kitsch hotels in the Mail, Kevin. This is the world's most kitsch hotels, from a mile-high club plane to a suite with a dragon in the bathroom. Gosh, not for me. Where would we find these?
You're just, no. Well, these are all around the world. If you look at the pictures, are pretty extraordinary. There's one in particular is a rainforest room. Now, I'm not sure I'd really want to wake up in the morning to be surrounded by trees or fake trees or whatever. And yeah, this is a huge book which has been produced by an American couple who are on this mission to stay in as many of these kitsch hotels as they can around the world, and then they've written a book about it. So it's not a bad way to make a living, I suppose, going around hotels, although not really my cup of tea, I have to say.
Derek, can you conjure up the strangest or most exotic kitsch hotel you've ever seen?
I can't. I mean, because of course taste is a very subjective thing, and to me, you know, looking at the pictures which some of our listeners won't have seen, they're garish, they're bright, they're vulgar. I just do not like it at all. And I'm trying to imagine who would pay that kind of money.
I mean, it looks a bit Disney, doesn't it?
It looks very Disney to stay in those sorts of hotels.
Well, what's the saying? A fool and his money are easily parted, or there's no accounting for taste. You can't buy taste. There's so many phrases like that. Do you like them?
I wish we had pictures of the one Les and I shared in Turkey for 6 weeks.
Paint us a picture, please.
Yeah.
We've got a minute. I've got time.
Where was it?
Paint us it was in Turkey.
Oh, right.
Turkey.
Yeah, that's the least interesting detail. Tell us more of the internal shenanigans.
We were hosting Who Wants to Be a Millionaire on the road. And Chris Tarrant obviously didn't want to do it, so Les and I got to split the week between us. And
good bedfellow?
Very good. We didn't share it at the same time.
I
had it for 3 days, he had it for 4 days. I had it for 4 days, he had it for 3 days, whatever. There we go. Thank you very much indeed, Kevin, and thank you, Derek, and thank you for watching. We'll be right back with more from the party conference after this.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel. Hello there.
Very good morning.
It's 9 o'clock. It's Tuesday, the 3rd of October. This is Breakfast in GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning and what we've been covering throughout the programme. The Prime Minister says he will not be pressured into making a decision about the future of the HS2 rail project, but there are reports he will be making an announcement in his keynote speech at the Tory party conference. A growing number of Conservative MPs are voicing concerns, while others remain tight-lipped today.
So that, I'm not sure that decision has been made. That decision hasn't been made. You asked about embarrassment. What I'm not embarrassed about is this Prime Minister that does the right thing on the basis of the evidence, coolly, calmly, unemotionally.
Trans women will be banned from female hospital wards. That's one of the proposals to be announced by the Health Secretary later today, in an aim to bring back, as he puts it, common sense to the health service.
The Home Secretary will also be taking to the podium today. She's expected to address government failings. At conference later, we'll be debating whether the government's taking the right route to deal with the migrant crisis.
And Alex Deacon will deal with the weather forecast.
Bit of a wet start in places this morning, but most of us will have a bright and breezy day. There'll be some sunshine. There will also be a fair few showers. Join me later for a full forecast.
So many views coming in throughout the course of the morning. Jill says, to be honest, as a northerner, I have absolutely no interest in HS2. What needs to be done is a better infrastructure from west to east. And so many people giving different thoughts on, whether or not that should go ahead. Simon saying HS2 should be built, but control of the project handed over to the mayors on the route, like Andy Burnham. And Bob says, are Labour going to employ Hornby to achieve the ambitious plans for the country they spoke about this morning? I'm not sure what that means.
Hornby. Train makers.
Oh, thank you.
The,
you understand.
the toy trade makers. Absolutely
Gotcha.
Beautiful, so it was. Here's the sting.
Okay.
Always wanted a Hornby train set.
Did you?
Absolutely. And then you get people like Rod Stewart, who's got this magnificent layout, goes on forever. Toy train set. Despite denials by the Prime Minister, there is speculation mounting that he will axe the Manchester leg of the high-speed HS2 project.
Yeah, I mean, the flip-flopping on this is unbelievable. As you know, our loyal viewers and listeners, we were talking about this pretty much Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, maybe a bit of Wednesday last week, and it's totally overshadowed most of the conference. It is now expected tomorrow to be in the Prime Minister's speech, and it will be billed as a bid to save billions in rising costs, with that investment being switched to local infrastructure in the north of England.
But it's not just the north missing out on HS2. Now there are doubts about whether services will reach central London at all. Let's go to the travel correspondent for The Independent, Simon Calder. Simon, you're at Euston Station, and if anything is built between Birmingham and London, it'll not even get that far, will it?
Well, we are getting all kinds of mixed messages here, and a very, very busy morning. Actually, behind me, about 50 metres away, there is a vast amount of work going on for the Euston Station part of HS2. And as you have been reporting, there have been questions about whether the train will ever reach Euston. It might end up in a place called Old Oak Common, next to Wormwood Scrubs Prison. A patch of wasteland in West London. And various leaks overnight are suggesting that it will go through to Euston, but it will certainly not go any further north than Birmingham. If that were to happen, it would effectively undermine the whole purpose of the line. Now, there's an awful lot of people, perhaps including you, who are looking at this and thinking, well, it's just going to get us to Birmingham 20 minutes quicker. That was what we were always told. Well, that was just a complete red herring. This is all about having more capacity on the lines, about having this Y shape. So you've got the Manchester line here, the Leeds and Sheffield line here, and they funnel down to Birmingham. They take all the high-speed traffic off the network, leaving much more capacity for local and regional services and for freight. And if you don't build the whole lot, well, actually, you get left with a shuttle between Birmingham and London, which is not really going to do many people much good at all, I'm afraid.
OK, let's assume that what we all suspect is going to happen, that this northern leg is going to be shelved, right? And we're going to hear from the government and they're going to say, we can't afford it, we're saving money, inflation, it's just too much. You know, the cost of aluminium, steel, whatever it is involved, it's just way more than what we first projected, and we're actually being responsible with our cash. Why is it that this country is not able to invest in these kinds of high-speed trains that they are able to on the continent? Why is it unaffordable for us but affordable for them? And not just on the continent, you go to Japan, wherever it might be. What are we doing wrong?
Well, yeah, OK, well, in Japan, for instance, when they started building the bullet trains, and we're talking now about the 1960s, it was extraordinary events. So there were lots and lots of opposition to that. And so, therefore, they decided, well, we're going to do it anyway. But if you look at France and Spain, which have by far the biggest opportunities for great high-speed rail across Europe, they are in the position of having this fantastic network that they can build through largely empty countryside. We don't have that luxury, which is why the Chilterns are being dug up, why there's so much controversy locally. There isn't the space. They've got to buy the land. It's very expensive. Add to that complete continuous re-specification by the government. They still don't know what's going to be happening here at Euston, and you get a project which is ballooning in cost, and the benefits are hugely reducing.
Would you be in favour of it being scrapped just on the basis of, you know, reinvesting that money perhaps in infrastructure east to west? You know, can you see the advantages, or are you disappointed if it does get shelved?
But no, I mean, it's not a question of whether I'm disappointed in it. It's very simply the fact that if you do not build a whole lot, then there is no point in it. A little shuttle between London and Birmingham is frankly not of any relevance. We've already got, actually, from here, 5 trains an hour to Birmingham. From Marylebone down the road, there's another couple there. So actually, Birmingham to London is the one bit of the country which doesn't need high-speed rail. The whole idea was to give the north, to give the East Midlands, to give Yorkshire much better connectivity to London. That has now, it appears, been scrapped. And of course, any improvements on public transport, as somebody who supports people getting around by train, I'm in favour of, but not if you're going to ditch a project which was absolutely going to transform the UK. And now it looks as though that will be torn up. And we will see if there were to be a change of government, which position the Labour Party is adopting this week, having changed its mind quite severely in the last 2 weeks.
Indeed. Simon, really appreciate your take. Thank you very much indeed. The Home Secretary today is set to make her speech at the conference as one of the key figures in the Conservative Party.
One of the issues she'll be thinking about, or many of the issues, include declining police numbers, rising crime rates and increasing numbers of illegal immigrants. OK, GB News' Pip Thompson will tell you more.
Home Secretary Suella Braverman will speak at the Conservative Party conference later as the government tries to get to grips with some of the issues affecting the country. It comes as record numbers of police officers quit the force and knife crime continues to rise. In the year to March, 4,668 officers left after a voluntary resignation, against a backdrop of 48,204 knife crime offences. That's a 5% increase on March last year. Immigration is another challenge the government hopes to tackle, as GB News data reveals that more than 25,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year. Something else on the Home Secretary's agenda is the rather contentious Rwanda plan, set for a battle at the Supreme Court next week. Speaking in Washington, D.C., Suella Braverman argued that the 1951 Refugee Convention is too loose and hinted that the government could leave the ECHR.
Any attempt to reform the Refugee Convention will see you smeared as anti-refugee. Similar epithets are hurled at anyone who suggests reform of the ECHR or its court in Strasbourg. I reject the notion that a country cannot be expected to respect human rights if it is not signed up to an international human rights organisation.
The Home Secretary is expected to use her speech in Manchester to boost her popularity ratings among the more right-wing arm of the party. Ahead of a general election, many backbenchers fear they could lose. So, are we looking at a future Tory leader? One wouldn't bet against it. Pip Thompson, GB News.
So the Home Secretary has suggested that a global effort on border control and a change in international law is the answer to deal with refugees and asylum seekers.
And we are likely to hear much more about that in her speech. But let's discuss options on migration. Joining us now is International Border Strategy Advisor Henry Bolton and former editor of the Labour List, Peter Edwards. Good morning to you both. Peter, let's start with you, first of all. A lot of what we can expect from the Home Secretary today, we probably had a bit of a preview in her speech last week and will revolve not only around her plans with Rwanda, but pulling out of the ECHR. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I think we've had a preview of what the premiership of Suella Braverman would look like if she ever gets elected. Now, my worry is the last line of Pip Thompson's report just now, that this is a pitch for a future leadership contest. Obviously, as you alluded to, there's a bit of a row at Conservative Party conference about whether to pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights. The last polling I saw in the Times showed there was not public support for that. Fewer than a quarter of people supported pulling out of the ECHR. So that tells us really that the Conservative Home Secretary is talking about something the country doesn't want. You have to think about why she's doing that. Is it the national interest or is it her own ambition?
Well, Peter raises the question there, Henry. Words, there are a lot of words. It's party conference time as well. A lot of words and not a lot of action.
No, indeed, and that's the problem. The Conservative Party has this problem of credibility. Rishi Sunak's 5 promises, of course, one of them was the dealing with the immigration, stopping the boats. Absolutely nothing in that regard has changed. He's not had any effect. The effect that the very slight reduction in numbers has been down purely to the weather in the Channel. I live on the south coast in Kent, and you can tell that that's the moment the weather's clear, they're coming across. So there's a credibility problem here. I think it's correct that Suella Braverman has probably fired the first shots in a leadership contest, but I would dispute the fact the idea that she's not got support behind her. The Conservatives, not the Liberals, the Conservatives in the Conservative Party undoubtedly like what she was saying. And indeed, I think we're seeing sort of speeches from Priti Patel that are a response to that, because I suspect that she would enter this battle as well. But at the end of the day, Suella Braverman is correct, in my view. And I was saying this when I was advisor to the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe. 57 countries, and I was advisor on borders to all of them. And I was trying to open the discussion there that actually a lot of our international conventions, including the Refugee Convention, including the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, they need to be revised. They are not still fit for purpose. The UN Convention on Refugees is 72 years old.
So she's opened the debate on that.
And it's a healthy debate.
And do you think it will go anywhere?
I don't think it will. At the same time, in that role and others, I have been in a situation where I've been in the room where various nations have tried to open such debates, but the guardians, if you like, of these conventions and treaties, such as the UNHCR itself, don't want to. And the reason they don't, if country A succeeds in opening up the treaty or the convention for discussion, then you get a whole raft of other countries coming in sort of with other ideas as well, and it'll take you 2 decades to resolve it.
Yeah, but Peter, in all of this discussion, it always strikes me that there's a failure to grasp that we have an unprecedented global challenge. People are on the move like never before, whether that's to do with social media, with seeing the opportunities in other places, whether climate change, the pressures on where they live, you know, political instability, whatever it might be. No one ever acknowledges that. And to basically argue, we want to pull out of the ECHR so that people stay in the first country they reach safety, would make it untenable for countries like Italy to cope with the crisis, at which point we would all have to ask ourselves as their neighbours what role we play in all of this. Why does anyone ever admit that?
Because they're governed by domestic electoral politics. But, you know, if I can quote Gordon Brown from 15 years ago in a financial crisis, global problems require global solutions. And this is exactly the thrust of your question, really, that it's not a British issue or an Italian issue. It's something for nations to deal with. And I pointed to one study I looked at fairly recently, which is, you know, we have a debate and laws are passed in Parliament, but actually, if you're a people smuggler conducting a very wicked trade, or you're one of the victims of that trade, having your life at risk on the sea, you're not really aware of the laws being passed in the House of Commons. You pay your money and you take your risk, and it's very sad. But the idea that domestic legislative tweaks can solve this problem is a big no-no. It's a global issue, and it's run by basically a cutthroat trade of criminals, sadly.
Peter, I put it to you that this crisis is similar to the one in the NHS, in that the people who are tasked with solving it are more interested in getting elected than tackling the problem in a sort of, you know, zooming out and looking at the bigger crisis. Do you accept that to an extent?
I don't know. I think it's
I'm sorry, I meant that to Henry Bolton.
Sorry. Yeah, yes, I do. I do accept that, and I think the analogy of the NHS is correct. What we've seen with the NHS is knee-jerk reactions over many, many years, adding this, new technologies coming for cardiology and so on. So, you know, let's do some more on that, and let's create the trusts and so on. Let's concentrate sort of maternity wards, all sorts of individual standalone policies, which have actually created now a very, very complex structure. It's the same with the borders. They're incoherent. What is lacking here is a clear set of national strategic objectives set at the most high level of government, and then a drive, the leadership to create the drive and unity of effort across government, all government departments, to engage on this with a unity of effort. That is seriously lacking. We've got 8 different government agencies operating patrol boats in the English Channel. We are talking about migration. That's all fine, but all of the cocaine, all of the heroin, and 97% of the illegal firearms held in this country have come across our borders. Our borders are insecure. And if you look at Finland, you look at Canada, you look at the United States, you look at Denmark, you look at Sweden, you look at Italy, you look even at Albania, they have one agency that deals with everything at sea on the borders. Here, we've got different agencies dealing with pollution, immigration, narcotics trafficking and so on. Imagine running a police service like that. You've got one agency dealing with traffic accidents, another one dealing with burglaries, another one dealing with violent crime. It's bonkers. You've got to have a national framework, a national strategy, and you need the central leadership to drive it, not just one ministry.
We've got one Home Secretary. She's going to speak this afternoon in Manchester at the Conservative Party conference. Thank you, Henry Bolton. Peter Edwards, appreciate your input as well. Got to leave it there. Thank you.
Still to come, we're going to be hearing your views about the Chancellor's benefits crackdown. That's in just a moment.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, the Chancellor has reiterated the government's commitment to make benefit sanctions harsher. We spoke to him about it yesterday. And speaking at the conference, he announced the crackdown officially on those who don't do enough to find work whilst claiming benefits.
Well, what we're doing in this section of the programme, we are gauging your views to all of this. And we'll have a lot of GB views after we look at these videos from you, viewers and listeners.
Those who can work should work. I don't think you should be better off sitting at home than going out to work.
Seems like we're going in the same direction as America. We're chipping away at the national health. Now we're starting on the benefits. Don't they realise people in America, mothers are on the streets with the children, aimless. Also, crime rates going rocket and mental health issues too.
So I agree with benefits. It does need reform. I like the Finnish benefit system where there's lower payment for anybody in need and a higher payment for anybody who's lost their jobs or their business for 2 years to get them back on their feet. It's proven to alleviate long-term poverty and is cheaper for society.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Gosh, lots of your views coming in as well.
So many. Nicola, says, the welfare system was created to support people in their hour of need. Nobody objects to that, she says. The issue now is that we have a whole generation of families that have never worked, and it's seen as an entitlement and a life choice. There is a lack of work ethic in many who feel it's not worth working a low-paid job when benefits compare and cover the rent. I mean, I always, you know, my own father, we always had, you would never amount to anything in life if you didn't work. And people say there isn't work. But I remember as teenagers, we were braced for cutting grass, cleaning cars, doing newspaper rounds, goodness knows what it was. But it was always, that was your way of getting on
Yeah,
in
well,
life.
Brian shares that ethic. He says, I'm 71 years old and I'm still working, have been since 15, and I probably will be for another 3 years or so. Tony says, I work for a charity within the job centres helping people get into employment. During my time, all the people on benefits I saw, I calculated there were 15% who genuinely couldn't work for one reason or another, 15% who desperately wanted to work and were embarrassed to be there, and the other 70% were lazy and didn't want to work.
Well, we'll leave the final word with Paul, and he says state benefits are a safety net to assist people in times of need, but unfortunately they are now seen as an aspiration. But having said that, I wouldn't like to test them. I wouldn't like to work on benefits and survive on benefits. Thanks for watching today. We've been on air since 6 o'clock this morning. Hope you've enjoyed the show.
Up next, here's the weather with Alex Deakin.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a soggy start for parts of East Anglia and the southeast. Generally a bright and breezy kind of day with a few showers around. But as I said, a pretty wet start for parts of East Anglia, the southeast. A lot of spray and surface water on the roads, but that is all clearing away. Then we'll see some sunshine coming through. Plenty of showers coming into western Scotland, still quite breezy here. And we'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers for northern England, North Wales and Northern Ireland. But much of the south and east will stay dry and bright with some sunshine. Temperatures getting into the mid to high teens. A fresher feel for most compared to yesterday. Still quite windy across northern Scotland especially. Breezy elsewhere. That breeze leads down overnight, so we'll see a few showers drifting in, but many places will stay clear, particularly across the south and the east. Later on, though, some more wet and windy weather will come in across the Highlands and the Western Isles. Temperatures will drop down into single figures in rural spots, so a fresh start to Wednesday for most. A bright start, though, tomorrow morning across much of the Midlands and eastern England. Quite a lot of cloud further north and west, and that rain could cause some problems. It continues to feed into western Scotland. That rain really building up as we go through the day and starting to edge further south, so perhaps arriving across parts of the central belt into Northern Ireland. For England and Wales, just a few scattered showers, mostly in the west. Many central and eastern parts will be dry and bright, and temperatures again in the mid to high teens.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB